3 hours of unsolvable moral dilemmas. To fall asleep to. What if the kindest thing you ever did destroyed someone's life? And what if the cruelest moment you regret saved someone else's? Tonight, we're not chasing answers. We're drifting into the questions that never settle. The ones whispered by philosophers, echoed by physicists, and carried in the silence between two beating hearts. A baby's cry in a burning building. Do you save your child or someone else's? A secret that can bring peace, but only if you betray a promise, a lie that heals, a truth that breaks. These are not riddles to solve. They are mirrors, and in these next quiet hours, we'll wander through them, gently, slowly, like travelers in a dream where the laws of logic and love don't quite align. So take a breath. Unclench your thoughts. You don't need to decide. Just be here. Let the dilemmas hold you and fall asleep in the arms of the unknowable. The candle in the fog. What if the very questions that stir your soul at 2 a.m, the ones you bury beneath distractions by day, could also be the quiet music that lulls your mind to rest? Not solved, not silenced, just heard. This is not a path of answers. It is a walk through fog, hand in hand with wonder. Tonight, the fog doesn't hide you. It holds you. Each step into uncertainty isn't a mistake. It's a return to the honesty we forget while awake. There's no pressure to decide, no demand to be right, just the tender unfolding of a thought. And in the hush of that unfolding, something sacred emerges. 2 people sit side by side on a late-night train, watching their reflections flicker in the window. One breaks the silence. Do you ever wonder if helping one person could mean hurting another? The other tilts their head. All the time. That's the hard part, isn't it? Wanting to do good, but not always knowing who it's good for. There is no verdict in this exchange, no final word, only the warmth of shared uncertainty, a small mercy in a world that always wants clarity. Moral dilemmas live here, in the spaces between intention and impact. They show us the blurry edges of justice, where the map folds and the rules grow quiet. We think of ethics as clean lines, but more often, they are watercolor trails in the rain. You help one person and miss another. You choose kindness and still cause pain. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you real. This isn't about guilt, it's about grace. A grace that allows us to sit beside our choices and say, I don't know what's right, but I'm listening. In the soft candlelight of this fog, you begin to notice. Uncertainty isn't the enemy of sleep. It's the breath before rest, the release of needing to control every outcome. You're allowed to rest, even when the story isn't finished. Later, in a corner cafe, a stranger gently nudges their tray onto a crowded table. Mind if I sit here? My coffee's getting cold and everything else is full. There's a pause, a glance, then a nod. Just like that, the world becomes a little more forgiving. No logic, no rules, just a moment of shared space, a tiny kindness that needs no reason. And isn't that what moral dilemmas are? Quiet questions that linger between us, questions that don't always ask for solutions, only our presence, our willingness to not rush away, to not armor up, but to feel. So tonight, as the candle flickers in your mind, let it light not a path forward, but a circle around you, a circle of wonder, of softness, of curiosity without demand. Let the fog wrap you in silence. Let it carry your questions gently into the dark. Let them rest there with you, not to be solved, but to be softened. Now take a slow breath. Feel the air settle in your chest. You're not alone in this fog. You're just beginning. And as you close your eyes, we follow the flickering light into the first dilemma. The lifeboat decision. You're floating in an endless ocean. The sun is searing, the waves relentless. One lifeboat bobs in the water, its wooden frame groaning under the weight of too many desperate hands. Around you, faces of strangers, or maybe friends, eyes begging, time running out. You're not a hero, you're just the one forced to decide. And there it is, the cruel simplicity of the lifeboat problem. This isn't a scenario from fiction. It's a thought experiment that has haunted moral philosophers and survivalists alike. What happens when you can't save everyone? When resources like space, time, or breath run out? In this lifeboat, the harsh math of mortality takes over. There are more people than seats, more needs than solutions, more hearts than hope. Someone has to stay behind. But who? The lifeboat problem is a stripped-down version of ethical triage. It tears away social niceties and exposes the raw, primal questions we're usually too civilized to say out loud. Do you save the young child with a future ahead, or the elder whose wisdom has shaped many lives? The doctor who can treat the injured, or the mother holding her baby? The decision isn't just about life and death. It's about value, potential, legacy. But who gets to define those things? You? And here's the part no one tells you. There is no clean answer. Every choice is soaked in sorrow. If you prioritize skill, you sacrifice innocence. If you favor age, you turn your back on time. Every hand you let go of is a story you end. And the worst part? The ones left alive may not thank you. They may resent the burden of survival, may question why they were chosen while others were left to the sea. This isn't just a scenario for shipwrecks. It reflects decisions we quietly make every day, in hospitals, in policy, in silence. Every time a society rations care or diverts funds, every time a leader prioritizes one life over another, the lifeboat returns. But now let's shift the question. What if the lifeboat isn't real? What if all of this, every choice, every ripple, is nothing more than a projection? What if the hardest decisions we face aren't between people, but between versions of reality itself? And just like that, the lifeboat vanishes into mist, replaced by a far stranger question. Is any of this even real? The simulation hypothesis. Some nights, when the world softens and silence feels like silk, a thought slips quietly between the folds of your mind. What if all of this isn't real? A coffee shop hums softly with life. A woman waits in line, scrolling through her phone, the glow lighting her tired eyes. Next to her, a stranger turns and says gently, "You ever get that feeling? Like we're just background characters in someone else's game?" She laughs politely, but later, the thought lingers, like a scent she can't name, only feel. This is the simulation hypothesis, the notion that we, our lives, memories, love, grief, are strands of data woven into an invisible machine. A theory not born in sci-fi, but in serious minds. Thinkers like Nick Bostrom, who ask, if it's possible to simulate consciousness, would someone eventually do it? It's not just a technical question, it's a moral earthquake. Because if you were simulated, would your pain matter any less? Would your kindness become a glitch? Would your guilt dissolve into binary code? Or would it still burn the same behind your eyes? There's a boy sitting under streetlight shadows, alone with his thoughts. He mutters quietly to himself, "If none of this is real, does it still mean something that I chose to be good today?" A passing man slows, looks over, and replies without stopping, that's exactly when it means the most. In a simulated world, suffering doesn't disappear. It echoes louder. Programmed or not, when you feel pain, your body still flinches. When your heart breaks, no algorithm softens the blow. Even pixels, when arranged right, can bleed. And if we're avatars playing by rules we didn't write, why do we still feel guilt when we cheat? Why does forgiveness feel heavier than code should allow? Maybe morality isn't the system. Maybe morality is the signal, our proof that something real pulses beneath the fiction. The way light flickers through cracked glass, broken but still beautiful. Someone once whispered in a crowded room, if we're in a simulation, then whoever built this gave us sunsets, music, and the smell of rain on pavement. That has to count for something. Maybe we're not meant to know. Maybe the question isn't whether we're real, but whether our choices are. Whether, in this vast mystery, our decisions ripple through the code, shaping something greater than us all. As you settle in deeper, your thoughts gently blur. Not because they've disappeared, but because they've dissolved into something larger. And just before the next idea rises, a soft voice reminds you, it's okay to drift. Even questions can wait until morning. Now, let's descend deeper into a realm where time bends and paradox becomes your pillow. Let it carry you. The Grandfather Paradox. The room is quiet. A clock ticks softly in the background. You close your eyes and imagine something impossible. What if you could travel back in time? Not to change the world, but something smaller, more personal. Maybe you simply want to meet someone you've only known through family stories. Your grandfather, long before you were born. But then, a thought interrupts the serenity. What if your actions change everything? What if by mistake, you prevent your grandfather from ever meeting your grandmother? Suddenly, the world you knew begins to unravel. You were never born. And if you were never born, then how could you have traveled back in time at all? This haunting contradiction is known as the Grandfather Paradox, a timeless thought experiment that plays tug-of-war with logic, fate, and existence. It isn't just a scientific riddle, it's an emotional one. You begin to feel how fragile reality might be if time were more flexible than we think. Imagine standing in a past where your presence shouldn't exist, holding conversations that were never meant to happen, and altering events that were supposed to lead to you. In trying to explore your roots, you erase them. Somewhere in a late-night diner, two friends sit across from each other, coffee cooling in their cups. One leans in and asks, if I stopped my grandfather from meeting my grandma, would I disappear instantly? The other smiles and replies, or maybe you create a new timeline, one where you never existed, but this version of you, this traveler, is still real. Real enough to ask the question. That's the emotional weight of the Grandfather Paradox. It touches more than physics. It pulls at identity. If the past is not fixed, if our roots can be rewritten, what does that say about us? Are we merely products of a timeline, or something deeper? Memories held together by the illusion of continuity. And the ripple spreads. Think of causality as a string of dominoes. You push one, expecting the rest to fall in line. But what if that first push never happened? Or worse, what if you picked up the domino after it fell and put it back standing, undoing the very cause that set things in motion? Does the future forget? Or does it fracture into endless branches, each one carrying a different version of you, shaped by a different choice? In that moment of quiet thought, we're forced to ask not just, what if, But who am I if I change what I came from? It's no longer just a question of time. It's a question of meaning, of self, of whether we are tethered to a path or free to become something else entirely. And yet, just as time may loop and fold, so too might morality. Because if time can twist, can right and wrong do the same? What happens when what was once unthinkable becomes the only option? As the grandfather paradox fades into the twilight of your thoughts, a new question emerges. What if ethics themselves could loop? When doing wrong is the only way to protect what is right. The trolley problem, a meditation between tracks. You find yourself standing alone on a quiet street corner in your mind. It's twilight, soft gold light drifting through the air like forgotten lullabies. In the silence, you hear it, the low, distant rumble of a trolley approaching. And ahead of you, a strange, unsettling scene begins to take form. There are two sets of tracks. On one, 5 strangers are trapped, frozen in time. On the other, just one. And between you and them, a single lever, a choice. Not theoretical, not abstract. Real, at least to the part of your mind that still believes in consequences, even in dreams. Someone beside you, their voice gentle, curious, not pressing. Do you think doing something is always better than standing still? You glance at them. You don't know their name, but somehow the question feels familiar, like something you've asked yourself in the middle of a sleepless night. The trolley draws closer, not fast, just steady, like time itself, and now you feel it, that weight. It isn't metal or noise, it's decision, the quiet gravity of knowing that any move you make matters. This is the trolley problem, a riddle born from ethics classrooms and echoed in emergency rooms, policy debates, and the quiet regrets people rarely speak aloud. If you pull the lever, the trolley diverts. 1 life is lost, 5 are saved. If you don't, 5 will die, but your hands stay clean. And yet, nothing about this feels clean. A soft wind picks up in your mental landscape. The stranger sits beside you now. I once let someone make their own mistake, they say quietly, eyes far away. It felt like the right thing until it wasn't. They don't elaborate. They don't have to. You know that feeling too, because the trolley problem isn't really about railways or mathematics. It's about us, how we bear responsibility, how we define harm, how we live with the echoes of choices made in silence. Philosophers call it utilitarianism versus deontology, but your heart doesn't speak in categories. It speaks in pulses, in tremors, in questions that rattle the bones more than the brain. Pulling the lever could be mercy or interference. Standing still might be neutrality or cowardice. You wonder, does it change if the one person is someone you love? Does proximity make morality softer or harder? The stranger beside you offers no answers, just presence. You sit there for a while longer, not acting, not deciding, just breathing. And in this stillness, something settles. The hardest part of the trolley problem isn't the decision. It's living in the moment before it, knowing you must choose, and knowing you may never know what was right. The rumble fades, the tracks disappear. The stranger walks away without a word. You are alone again, but lighter now. Not because it's solved, but because you've stared it in the eye and allowed yourself to feel the weight without looking away. And now, as the streetlights blink on in your subconscious and the air grows cooler, we drift further, away from dilemmas built on tracks and numbers, into something darker, something quieter. The next question does not ask you to choose between lives, but between truth and illusion. Close your eyes. The next turn is hidden in shadow, and it's waiting. the veil of ignorance. Close your eyes and picture this. You're about to design a brand new world, a fresh society from the ground up. But here's the twist. You have no clue who you'll be in that world. You could be born into wealth or into poverty. You might live as a leader, or you might struggle under someone else's rule. You don't know your gender, your talents, your class, or your health. With that uncertainty in mind, how would you build your laws, your systems, your justice? This is the essence of the veil of ignorance, a thought experiment introduced by the American philosopher John Rawls. It isn't just a mental puzzle, it's a mirror that reflects the heart of fairness. Rawls argued that the most ethical principles are the ones we'd agree on if we were stripped of all personal bias, because when we don't know where we'll land in society, we're forced to consider everyone, not just ourselves. Let that settle in. If you didn't know whether you'd be born into a mansion or a slum, wouldn't you design a world where basic needs, like food, shelter, education, were guaranteed for all? Wouldn't you hesitate before making success dependent on luck of birth? The veil doesn't erase ambition, it removes favoritism. It reminds us that justice should not be tailored for the privileged few. It should protect the vulnerable many. A quiet voice might whisper in the dark, if this idea is so logical, why don't we live by it? Because in the real world, we already know our place. We cling to the advantages we've been given, and too often we mistake fortune for merit. But the veil forces us to reset the game, to choose principles not as winners, but as humans. Now imagine this thought experiment being taught not in a classroom, but in a conversation between two strangers in a cafe. One leans forward and says, "What if you woke up tomorrow as the person you ignored yesterday?" The other stirs their coffee and replies, "Then I'd want that person to be safe, to be heard, to be loved." That's the power of the veil of ignorance. It's not about building perfect systems, it's about reawakening empathy. It doesn't ask you to solve inequality, it asks you to see yourself in it. So as we drift from this idea into the next, we leave behind the frameworks of justice and step into a deeper mystery. What if everything we're building rests not on truth, but on illusion? What if the world itself is not what it seems? Let's find out. The allegory of the cave. You've spent your whole life facing a wall. Shapes pass by, shadows, flickering outlines. They move, they dance, they tell stories. And so, you believe that's all there is. It's not foolishness, it's comfort, it's familiarity. After all, how do you know what you've never seen? Now, what if one day someone gently takes your hand? No words, just a gesture. They lead you beyond the wall. You resist at first. It's cold, it's strange. The light hurts. But then, something shifts. The warmth of the sun touches your skin for the first time, and it feels real. Not like the pale echoes on the stone behind you, but real, like the scent of rain on hot pavement, or the weight of a loved one's hand in yours. That is Plato's cave. Two friends wait on a park bench. One breaks the silence. Do you think people really want the truth? The other shrugs, watching pigeons, only when it doesn't cost them comfort. And maybe that's the whole point. The shadows are simple. They don't hurt. They don't challenge. But the light, the light, it asks something of us. It asks us to change. And isn't that the hardest thing? The prisoner who escapes the cave returns, eyes wide, heart pounding, ready to share what he's seen. But no one listens. They mock him, call him mad, because in their world, shadows are safe. Light is a threat. It's not just a story. It's a mirror, and the reflection is hard to face. Think about all the times you dismissed someone for offering a new perspective, not because it wasn't true, but because it was too true, too bright, too painful, like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having. A barista places 2 cups down, says softly, one with sugar, one with truth. The customer pauses. I'm not sure I can taste the difference. We all carry caves inside us, quiet places where we choose shadows over sunlight. Sometimes it's habit, sometimes fear, sometimes we simply don't know the door is open. And yet, in every human soul, there is a flicker, a yearning not just to see, but to understand. So what now? You don't need to sprint toward the sun. Just noticing the wall is enough for tonight. That small awareness, gentle, weightless, is already light. You may close your eyes now if you wish. The world will wait. So will the truth. And next, as we leave behind ancient shadows, let us turn inward, toward the quiet, persistent question. What makes a person themselves? Let that question drift with you, like light on the edge of waking. The Ship of Theseus. Beneath the slow sway of imagined waves, a thought floats like driftwood in the moonlight. If you were to take a ship, an old weathered vessel that has sailed countless journeys, and replace one plank, you'd still call it the same ship. Replace another and another, until every single piece has been swapped. Now ask yourself, is it still the same ship, or something entirely new cloaked in the memory of the old? This is the ancient paradox known as the Ship of Theseus, a philosophical riddle that has traveled through time like the ship itself, unchanged in essence, yet always fresh with meaning. It's not just a question about wood and nails. It's a question about identity, about the quiet erosion and reassembly of who we are. It's about you, about me, about the way we silently change day after day, thought after thought. Late at night, one might lie in bed and wonder, if I'm no longer the person I was at 16, my thoughts reshaped, my habits replaced, my body altered, am I still me? Or am I merely wearing the echo of someone I used to be? And if so, where did they go? Do you think people ever really change? She whispers in the dark, her voice softened by the hush of sleep nearby. He turns his head, staring up at the ceiling as if it holds the answer. I think we don't notice the change until we can't go back. So then, are we still who we were? Maybe we never were, just versions, rewritten over and over. She falls silent, then quietly says, but I miss the old me sometimes, even if she wouldn't understand who I am now. There's something haunting in that, the idea that parts of us have died quietly, without funerals, a childhood laugh, a belief we no longer hold, a love we've outgrown. These planks, once central to our being, get replaced by grief, insight, time, survival. We keep sailing forward, unaware of the reconstruction. And yet, there's beauty in this quiet metamorphosis. We are both the ship and the carpenter. We carry forward what we can. We replace what breaks. We patch the holes. We endure storms. And somehow, we keep going. Not by remaining the same, but by learning how to hold on to our direction when the materials shift beneath our feet. So if someone were to ask you, are you the same person you were 10 years ago? What would you say? Maybe the better question is, do you still carry the same soul, some quiet essence that stays even when everything else changes? Now let's leave the docks of memory behind and take a step further, toward the fine, fragile tightrope that stretches between pleasure and pain. Where identity fades, sensation begins. The experience machine. Would you trade your life for a dream that never ends? There's a room, quiet, padded, warm. A gentle hum pulses beneath the floor, like a heartbeat wrapped in velvet. Inside it stands a machine, not menacing, not cold, just waiting. A chair reclines like a whisper. Electrodes shimmer, half science, half invitation. You sit, you close your eyes, and from that moment forward, you live your perfect life. Not the life you have, the life you wish for. No heartbreak, no loss. Every sunrise exactly the hue you love. Every embrace comes when you need it most. The applause, the friendships, the kind of love that never forgets your favorite song. But here's the catch. You'll never know it's not real. Late philosopher Robert Nozick posed this dilemma through what he called the experience machine. It doesn't hurt. It only offers pleasure, the precise shape of your dreams. So why hesitate? Would you do it? Someone once asked quietly in the lull of a nearly empty cafe. The other person didn't answer at first. She stirred her tea like she was weighing something heavier than liquid. I think I'd want to know it was real, she finally said. But what if it feels real? Isn't that enough? She smiled, but not in agreement. Then why do I still cry during old home videos? That question lingers, because happiness, true happiness, isn't sugar spun in isolation. It's the trembling that comes before a risk. It's the fight before the forgiveness. It's the muddy edge of being human. Plugging into that machine may remove suffering, but it removes choosing. And when we cannot choose, even joy begins to taste artificial. You might think, but what if I'm tired? What if I just want peace? Fair. There are nights when sleep is the only comfort, when the weight of the world presses against your chest like fog pressing glass. But here's something soft to hold on to. Our pain, as much as our joy, writes the story we can call ours. Without grief, there's no gravity. Without struggle, no soul. And still, we long for ease. Not long ago, someone told me their happiest memory was sitting in silence with their grandfather, peeling oranges in the afternoon light. No machine could have programmed that. No machine would have known the sunlight mattered more than the conversation. The experience machine forces us to ask, do we want what feels good or what means something? And the answer might change depending on the day. But tonight, if your heart feels heavy, let me offer this. It's okay to rest. It's okay to want escape. That doesn't make you less wise. It makes you real. Because maybe meaning isn't always a mountain we climb. Sometimes it's the slow breath beside someone who stayed, the laugh we didn't expect, the tear we finally let fall. And in the end, we don't choose the machine. We choose to feel. Now, gently, let that thought drift. Don't hold it too tightly. Just let it go like steam rising into cool air. And follow me now into the next question. If the pain of a single child could bring peace to an entire world, would we dare let them suffer? The ones who walk away from Omelas. In the city of Omelas, everything sparkles with joy. The bells ring like laughter, the streets are filled with music, and the people live in what can only be called paradise. Children run free in the golden light. Lovers walk with hands gently tangled, and old age arrives only after a life well lived. But somewhere beneath this brilliance, in a locked, windowless room, sits a child, filthy, naked, and afraid. This child does not laugh. This child has never known kindness. And every person in Omelas knows their joy depends on that child's suffering. At some point, they all learn the truth, not when they're toddlers, not when they're too innocent to bear it. But as they come of age, the truth is revealed. Some scream, some cry. Most feel a sick twist in their stomachs. And then, they return to their lives. The festival resumes. The sun still shines. The laughter continues, because it must. If anyone ever lifts a hand to help the child, the happiness of Omelas will dissolve like fog in the morning. Yet some, just a few, react differently. They don't scream. They don't argue. They stand quietly in that dark room, eyes wide and hearts breaking. And then, without a word, they leave. They walk out of the city, past the gates, into a place no one speaks of. Not in anger, not in revolution, just a quiet departure from a paradise they cannot accept. Ursula K. Le Guin's story is not merely fiction, it's a mirror, a parable wrapped in soft, beautiful prose that pierces deep. We might not live in Omelas, but we live in a world where comfort often comes at a cost. A child assembling your phone, a factory leak that poisons a river, an overlooked pain we justify for the sake of progress. If you knew your happiness required someone else's suffering, would you still smile? Would you walk away? A soft voice asks in the dark. I don't know, the other replies. Is there even a place to go? Maybe not, but maybe the walking matters. And just like that, the dilemma rests, not on the child, but on us. Do we stay and justify, or do we leave and wander without answers? This isn't just about morality, it's about silence, about the quiet space between comfort and conscience. As the lights of Omelas fade behind us, we step forward into the next question, not about cities, but about people, not about utopia, but about the moments when strangers suffer, and we choose to look away or listen. The Bystander Effect. There's someone lying on the sidewalk, curled beside a flickering street lamp, their breath shallow, their body still. And yet, the city doesn't stop. Footsteps quicken, gazes flick away. One person adjusts their coat, another checks their phone. The world moves, but no one bends down. Why is that? You might think, maybe they thought someone else would help. And you'd be right. That's the bystander effect, one of the most quietly haunting truths about us. The more people there are, the less anyone feels responsible. It's not malice, it's inertia, a waiting game where everyone loses. In a hushed cafe on a rainy night, a conversation flickers like candlelight between two strangers seated shoulder to shoulder. Did you see the man outside? I thought someone else already called an ambulance. I thought the same. And in that moment, something breaks. Not loudly, just a soft, shared guilt, like realizing you left your porch light on during a blackout and assumed the whole block would glow. The bystander effect isn't just about emergencies. It whispers into everyday moments. The bullying on the school bus, the coworker crumbling in silence behind a screen, the elderly man on the corner struggling with a bag too heavy for his frame, the silence we wear when our voice could have helped someone stand. Psychologists call it diffusion of responsibility. But for the rest of us, it feels more like the soul stalling mid-step, a kind of moral dizziness where you want to move, but your body doesn't. And later, lying in bed, your heart plays reruns of the moment you didn't act. Why does it happen? Because the brain searches the crowd for a cue, any cue that says, this is safe. And if everyone is frozen, we take their stillness as permission to remain still too. Our empathy isn't gone. It's just suspended, waiting for someone to go first. But here's the quiet tragedy. When everyone waits, nothing changes. There's something achingly human about this. We long to do good, but not alone. We need the company of courage. And sometimes all it takes is one person stepping forward to ripple the entire current. Think of the bystander not as someone weak, but as someone entranced by the spell of social hesitation. The moment they speak, the spell breaks. Would it have mattered if I'd stopped? Maybe not to the world, but to that one person. It might have meant everything. A pause, a heartbeat, a truth too soft to shout, but too loud to forget. This is not about shame, it's about awakening. An invitation to notice that flicker of hesitation in ourselves and to honor it not with fear, but with choice. The choice to act when no one else will, to kneel beside the stranger, to speak up when silence would be easier, to hold eye contact and say, "Are you okay?" Even if your voice trembles. You may not always be the first, but you can be the one. And as this thought settles like a blanket over your body, let your breath steady. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day's static dissolve. Whether you drift off now or later, know this. Compassion doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stays behind when others walk past. Let's now move from moments of silent hesitation to the weight of truth itself, when knowing becomes a responsibility, not an option. The whistleblower's burden. It starts with a knot in the stomach, a silent discomfort that grows each time you witness something no one else dares to mention. You're holding on to a truth, one that weighs heavier with each passing day. You know it could save lives, could prevent harm, could spark change. But the cost, your job, your safety, your very identity. Whistleblowers are often painted as either saints or traitors, heroes who speak truth to power, or betrayers who turn their backs on loyalty. But reality lives in the gray space between. The decision to come forward is rarely clean, never easy. It's a moral tightrope where every step forward might mean losing the very ground beneath you. Do you think they'll listen if I tell them? A whispered question over coffee, eyes scanning the room. They might, the other replies, cautious, but they might crush you first. It's not just about facts or evidence. It's about the system you're fighting. A system that rewards silence, that punishes exposure. You might be right, but being right doesn't guarantee safety. The world doesn't always cheer for truth tellers. Many whistleblowers wrestle not just with risk, but with loneliness. Once loyal colleagues may turn distant, old friends may stop calling, family might plead, just let it go. You feel like you're shouting into a void where echoes are the only reply. And yet, some do it anyway. Not for fame, not for vengeance, but because something in them won't allow the silence to continue. A quiet voice inside says, "If not you, then who?" But even then, questions linger. What if your information is flawed? What if the fallout harms more than it helps? What if speaking out burns down more than just the lie? The burden is not just in the telling, but in what follows. Legal battles, media storms, sleepless nights replaying every decision. It's a kind of isolation that few understand, and yet, from this isolation can come something strangely empowering, a deep sense of integrity that no employer, no backlash, no headline can erase. Would you do it again? Maybe, they say, pausing, but not for me, for the ones who couldn't speak. So, are whistleblowers heroes, traitors? Maybe the question itself is flawed. Maybe they are simply human, deeply flawed, deeply afraid, and deeply driven to tell the truth when it matters most. And now, as we leave this tension between silence and speech, we ask something even more unsettling. What happens when the betrayal doesn't come from outside, but from within your own mind? The brain in a vat. A slow breath in, like dipping beneath the surface of warm water. And now, drift with me into a world where reality bends, not outward, but inward. You're not in your bed, not in your room, not even in your body. You're just a brain, suspended in a quiet vat, weightless. Wires feed pulses into your cortex. And those pulses, they are your world, a sunrise over the ocean, the smell of coffee, the voice of someone who once told you they loved you. None of it real. But does that make it meaningless? There's a strange calm to the idea. If your senses are fooled perfectly, would you ever know the difference? The vat doesn't hum, it whispers. A whisper so convincing it feels like home. And somewhere in that whisper, a question curls up beside you like a cat ready to sleep. What if all this is just an echo of a world that never was? Do you ever get déjà vu just brushing your teeth? Someone says quietly beside you. Only when I forget which memory I'm supposed to be living in, comes the reply. Two strangers, or maybe just two sides of you, conversing gently in the liminal space between logic and longing. Because here's the deeper current beneath the metaphor. If your experiences are controlled, simulated, artificially streamed into you, then what is you? Are you your thoughts, your memories? Or are you just the script being read aloud by an unseen narrator? Close your eyes tighter. Now open your mind. Because this is where we slip not into paranoia, but into poetic wonder. We aren't just questioning reality to unravel it. We're learning to see how fragile our trust and perception really is. A street lamp flickers. You think it's raining, but maybe it's just the soft tapping of an idea that hasn't quite taken form. Let me say this softly. The point of the thought experiment isn't to make you paranoid. It's to help you understand that even if everything is a dream, how we behave still matters. Even if we're floating brains, the kindness we offer, the harm we avoid, the beauty we create, these still pulse through whatever world we're in. A gentle voice asks, "So, if none of this is real, do I still owe you an apology?" And the answer, warm and wordless, hovers in the air like breath on glass. Maybe the apology matters even more, because it's the one thing the simulation didn't program. It came from the awareness behind the eyes, not the signals in front of them. So now, as your mind settles and the ripples fade, let yourself float freely, not in a vat, but in the space between certainty and sleep. From here, we travel next to a different dilemma, where doing good might not feel so good after all, when the act of helping might hurt more than it heals. The paradox of charity. Somewhere between midnight and morning, your mind floats to the memory of a time you tried to help. A warm gesture, a generous impulse, maybe $1 in a jar, a meal for a stranger, a hand extended when the world looked away. There's something beautiful in that instinct, isn't there? But what if doing good did harm? The paradox of charity begins with a simple truth. Not all kindness lands the way it was sent. You give a gift, and it blooms in one life, but quietly unroots another. A school built by a foreign donor might push out local teachers. A free clinic may undermine the small business of a neighborhood healer. One child gets a scholarship while their friend watches, quiet, wondering why they were left behind. Two people sit at a table, steam rising from mugs in their hands. "Did I do something wrong?" One asks softly, eyes tracing the rim of their cup. "You did something right," the other says gently. "But maybe the world wasn't ready to receive it right." It's easy to assume that good intentions are enough, that if our hearts are in the right place, the consequences will take care of themselves. But hearts don't see the whole chessboard. They move like water, flowing toward need, not always knowing what gets washed away in the current. There's a story whispered in every alleyway of assistance, of a village that no longer grows its own food because free aid replaced the crops, of a boy who grows up expecting help to arrive and forgets how strong his own legs are, and of the silent ones, the ones not chosen, not helped, not seen, whose stories go untold, and yet still, not acting can feel even heavier. What's worse, a misstep in love or a refusal to step at all? The question hangs in the air like breath in winter. You mean well, but what happens when well-meaning becomes well-wounding? A woman waits outside a corner shop. She sees a man offering blankets to people on the sidewalk. "That's kind," she says to her friend. "But didn't that woman down the street sell hand-woven ones to survive?" "She did," her friend replies. But kindness doesn't always check the market first. They walk in silence. In the soft folds of charity, there's a quiet tension. Action versus impact. Do you take the shot, knowing it might miss the mark, or stay still, hoping someone else fires straighter? Even in your own life, you may have felt this, helping a friend only to find they leaned too hard, giving advice that turned into distance. Sometimes doing good isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, one that circles back with unexpected weight. But here's the heart of the dilemma. Does complexity excuse inaction? Or do we walk forward, careful and conscious, knowing we might stumble, but choosing to move anyway? Not every gift is clean. Not every act of kindness has pure results. But still, something in us yearns to give. Maybe it's not about perfect help, but about present help. Not about saving, but about showing up and learning, always learning, what giving truly means. So as the mind quiets and the breath evens out, we leave this question not with a verdict, but with a sigh, a reminder that love, real love, is brave enough to ask itself hard things, and soft enough to try anyway. Now let us slip gently from the outer world of giving into the inner chamber of doing. Because sometimes the hardest help to offer is to ourselves. Akrasia, the weakness of will. You know the feeling. That quiet moment late at night when your mind speaks clearly, almost too clearly. It tells you what to do. Stop, begin, forgive, call, let go. And yet, hours later, your body does none of it. The cup is still on the counter. The apology remains unsent. The pain, unspoken. You knew better, but something invisible held you back. That something has a name. The ancient Greeks called it Akrasia, a war between what we know and what we do. Two friends are walking in the park. One says, "I told myself I wouldn't text him again." The other nods. "And did you?" She shrugs. "Of course I did, even while knowing how it would end. Isn't that strange?" But the strangeness is familiar. We all carry this contradiction, an inner civil war between reason and craving, wisdom and weakness. Akrasia isn't failure. It's a mirror, quietly showing us the limits of control. Not every battle is loud. Some are whispered inside the heart, between a better self and a present self, and the silence between them can be deafening. We've all made a vow in the morning and broken it by night. That doesn't make us liars. It makes us human. You might remember a moment like this. Not dramatic, just ordinary. You walk past a sink full of dishes and say, "I'll do it after this episode." But you never do. Not because you're lazy, but because the mind seeks comfort before growth. Reason knows the cost. Desire offers the discount. So you stay. What does it mean to be free then? if knowing what's right doesn't guarantee that we'll do it? Are we choosing it all? Or are we riding a current, pretending we're steering the boat? One night, a man stands in front of his fridge. He knows he's not hungry. He feels it in his chest, not his stomach. But still, he opens the door. Not for food, for relief, a brief distraction from something unnamed. And in that motion, you see it, Akrasia. Not weakness of character, but a small rebellion against the self that wants to change too fast. This struggle, soft and quiet, is why New Year's resolutions fade like footprints in the sand, why we hold grudges we want to release, why we reach for what we swore we'd leave behind. The pull of comfort often outweighs the whisper of wisdom. And yet, we keep listening. There's a tenderness in that, don't you think? We want to change. We try. That effort matters, even if the result stutters. So perhaps the question isn't, why didn't I do what I knew was right? But rather, why does the heart take longer to catch up to the truth? You are not alone in this slow dance between knowing and doing. It's the human condition, a paradox stitched into our psychology. And slowly, with grace, you can learn to close the gap, not through force, but by making peace with the parts of you that aren't ready yet. Let yourself soften here. If you're drifting off now, that's okay. Your breath doesn't need permission. Let this idea settle. You are not wrong for taking time, and your desire to grow, even if delayed, is still sacred. We now move forward, gently, into another flame, a dilemma not of the self, but of justice. What does it mean to deserve punishment? Who decides? And can pain ever be righteous? Let's step into that fire together. The desert island punishment. Imagine this. The world has vanished. Civilization is nothing more than a fading echo. You find yourself stranded on a deserted island. No phones, no courts, no police, no God watching from the sky. Just you and them. The one person who hurt you the most. Maybe they betrayed you. Maybe they stole years of your peace. Maybe they shattered something you'll never get back. And now, with no witnesses and no laws, the silence asks, what will you do? There's a strange purity to this scenario, a kind of cruel clarity. Because when the eyes of the world are gone, when punishment won't be punished, the only thing that remains is what's inside you. Is it mercy? Is it rage? Or is it something you haven't even named? Two people sit on opposite sides of a small fire made of driftwood. One stares out to sea. The other watches them. Do you ever think you deserved what happened? A long silence. Then, number. But I think I deserve peace now. And if I can't give you peace, then maybe we'll both rot here with what we've done. In this thought experiment, morality is stripped of its scaffolding. There are no consequences, no praise, no jail time, no redemption stories. What would you do if revenge tasted like fruit hanging low? If forgiveness felt like swallowing salt water? Would you build justice from your own hands, or realize that what you seek has nothing to do with the other person at all? In many ways, this is not about them. It's about you, about what kind of world still lives in you when the world outside disappears. When law and order are gone, does your conscience remain? And that question, the real one, whispers not just across the island, but through your own heart. If no one ever finds out what you did, will you still be able to live with it? Because maybe justice isn't something we apply to others. Maybe it's something we have to survive within ourselves. Now let the flames of that island fade and walk barefoot into a colder place. A place where even knowing what is right doesn't always show you what to do next. the Buridan's donkey. There's a quiet cruelty in perfect symmetry. Picture it, not with your eyes, but with your breath. A donkey stands still, not tired, not lazy, just suspended. To his left, a pile of hay. To his right, an identical one. Equal in distance, equal in delight. And yet he starves. It's not hunger that kills him. It's the space between left and right. It's the chasm that opens when nothing stands out. This is Buridan's donkey, a creature trapped not by walls, but by mirrors. And in those mirrors, don't we see a part of ourselves? Which job should I take? Which person should I love? Which truth should I believe when both wear the same smile? There's a kind of fear that hides beneath options. It tiptoes in when both roads seem fair, whispering, "What if I choose wrong and lose everything?" A woman once told me, as we both lingered at a crosswalk blinking red and white. I used to think choosing was about clarity. Now I think it's just about movement. She laughed, not to ease the tension, but to admit she wasn't immune either. Then she stepped forward. In moments of stillness, when the world stops spinning and the lights are soft, indecision doesn't feel like thinking. It feels like sinking, not like drowning in water, but like being wrapped in silk so tightly, even your thoughts forget how to wriggle free. Maybe you've felt it too, standing in a grocery aisle, reading two nearly identical labels. Maybe the bigger choices weren't so different. A career path, a hometown, a moment of silence when you could have spoken. The question we whisper in the dark is not, "What if I choose wrong?" but "What if neither choice matters?" Yet even in this quiet paralysis, the body longs to move, like branches straining toward whichever wind dares to blow. We are not donkeys, and yet we starve too. On indecision, on the fear of picking a lesser future when futures look the same. And somewhere, someone gently asks, "If I flip a coin, does that make me reckless or free?" To which a stranger, sitting across on a faded bench, might reply, "No, it just makes you human. Sometimes the decision needs your hand more than your certainty." Buridan's donkey never chose, but we can. Not because we're sure, but because hunger itself is reason enough. And now, from this still place of quiet tension, we move forward once more. From indecision to infection, not of the body, but of the soul. When you see wrong done, does it stay with you? Or does it slowly become you? Close your eyes. Let the next question arrive without effort. You're not here to solve, just to feel. And if you drift off, know that the donkey, at last, is resting too. The Lucifer Effect. It begins not with fire, but with silence. The kind of silence that fills a room when something has gone terribly wrong and no one speaks of it, because everyone was part of it. What makes good people do bad things? This is not a question for monsters. It's a question for you, for me, for the friend who laughed too hard at someone else's pain, for the bystander who watched and looked away. "Do you think I'd ever hurt someone if I was in that position?" she asked him softly, brushing crumbs from her lap as they sat cross-legged on the floor. He didn't answer immediately. "I don't know," he said at last. "But I think the question is whether you'd even know you were hurting them." The Lucifer Effect was coined by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, born not from myth, but from a mirror. In 1971, the Stanford prison experiment showed us something uncomfortable. The roles we wear can change the soul beneath. Students, ordinary young men, became guards and prisoners. In just days, the guards, who were told to keep order, became cruel, aggressive, even sadistic, and they were not evil. They were normal, just like us. just like you, just like me. There's something haunting about that. It's the realization that morality isn't chained to our bones, that even kindness can bend under pressure if the system is warped enough. Like a spoon in boiling water, the shape of our choices melts into whatever we're told is necessary. Do you think they knew? Knew what? That they had changed. He thought for a while. Number, that's the terrifying part. I think they thought they were still the same. We often like to believe evil wears a face, sharp teeth, glowing eyes, a maniacal laugh. But Zimbardo showed us it wears uniforms too. It speaks softly. It might be the boss who tells you to fire someone unfairly, the officer who follows orders blindly, the classmate who joins the bullying to fit in. The system does not scream, it whispers. And yet, this isn't hopeless. Resistance is possible, but it isn't passive. It's a muscle, one that must be exercised daily with conscience, courage, and clarity. It starts in small moments, saying no when others nod, asking why when everyone stays silent. But what if I'm already part of a system like that? He looked at her gently. Then the fact you're asking that question means you haven't lost yourself yet. So perhaps the Lucifer Effect isn't just about how people fall into darkness. It's about whether they notice the descent and whether they choose to climb back. Let us now walk away from the corridors of power and pressure. Let us move into a more tender, tangled space where morality and affection collide. For next comes the dilemma, not of control, but of trust. When love is wrapped in lies, what truth remains? The Benevolent Lie. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet where thoughts float up like fallen leaves on a still pond. In that softness, a question stirs. Is it ever right to lie to someone you love? You didn't mean to deceive. You told them they looked fine, even when you noticed they'd been crying. You said everything would be okay, though you had no way of knowing. Was it comfort or control disguised as compassion? There's a kind of lie that wears perfume, gentle, careful, wrapped in silk. A lie that doesn't shout or harm on the surface, but steps softly into someone else's truth, takes it in its hands, and quietly edits the ending. You meant well, but is that enough? One voice, calm and curious, breaks the stillness. You told her the letter got lost? A pause. The other responds slowly. She didn't need to read what was in it. It would have destroyed her. A longer silence, the kind that holds more weight than words. But maybe she had the right to know. You think of the way your mother's eyes lit up when you told her the test results were nothing serious. The way your partner smiled when you said, "No, you didn't offend anyone." These weren't betrayals, not really. They were small detours, meant to spare someone else from walking through fire. But even a soft detour takes them off their own path. And in that gentle misdirection lies a thread of control. You chose what they could handle. You shaped their world without their consent. Does love give you that right? A breeze of memory passes by. A child learning the truth about Santa. A friend discovering their trust had been gently tampered with. The realization doesn't come like thunder. It arrives like dusk, slow, creeping, irreversible. And suddenly, what was kind becomes cloudy. You wonder, in the darkest corners of care, is truth a gift? Or a burden we pass to those we love, trusting they'll know what to do with it? Another voice hums in, tired but honest. I told him the job went to someone else, but he failed the background check. I know, but he's already struggling. It felt kinder this way. A pause, fragile and suspended. And when he finds out, the reply drifts like a leaf spinning down. I'll be the villain, but for now, he gets one more night of peace. Benevolent lies are lullabies for the anxious. They rock us gently away from pain until we wake. And then, what do we do with the silence left behind? Now, as the air thickens and sleep begins to blur the edges of thought, let the question float without answer. You don't need to solve it now. This isn't a test, just a touchstone for the soul. And as we drift forward, we leave the world of kindness and deceit behind. Next, we descend into deeper waters, where memory itself begins to bend, where illusion is not a choice, but a mirror turned backward. Let your breath soften. You can always return to this thought tomorrow. Tonight, we let it go. The false memory trap. There's a photograph in your mind, isn't there? A perfect moment. A birthday candle flickering in a dark room, your mother's voice singing softly, the warmth of a hug that made everything okay. But what if that memory never happened? False memories don't arrive with warning labels. They don't announce themselves as illusions. They slip in quietly, dressed in the same emotional colors as your truths, warm, vivid, comforting. Like a dream you swear was real until you try to explain it out loud. These memories feel as solid as any fact, and yet they may be stitched together from suggestion, influenced by stories told to us or formed in the fog after trauma. The brain fills in gaps, not to deceive, but to protect, to make meaning out of the chaos. But in doing so, it sometimes writes chapters we never lived. Do you remember when we got lost in the forest that summer? No, that wasn't me. You must be thinking of someone else. A silence follows, and you wonder, why do I remember it so clearly? When we talk about identity, we often talk about memories. We say, I am what I've been through. But if what we've been through is flexible, even fictional, what becomes of the self? Are we still us if part of our story is a myth? It's not just a philosophical riddle, it's a human one. Entire court cases have hinged on memories later proven false. Family feuds erupt over mismatched recollections. And perhaps most painfully, people carry guilt for things they never actually did, just memories implanted by fear, suggestion, or grief. The mind doesn't mean to lie. It just wants to make sense. But when it does, the line between what was and what we believe was begins to blur. And maybe that's the quiet tragedy, or the quiet miracle, because it means we're not fixed. The story of us is always being edited, rewritten, colored by emotion, softened by nostalgia. In a way, we are the authors of ourselves, even when we don't hold the pen. So who are you really? The facts? The feelings? The version of your childhood you tell at dinner parties? Or the version no one else remembers? Let your mind gently drift now, like pages of an old diary turning in the wind. Whether truth or fiction, these memories form the rhythm of your identity. And as the night deepens, we step away from the past to question something older still: fate. Do we shape it, or are we simply following a script already written in the stars? Let's rest now and step into the next dilemma with soft curiosity. The illusion of choice. A streetlight flickers above a quiet corner cafe. Inside, a young woman hesitates before reaching for the decaf. She's trying to cut back on caffeine. But was that really her decision? Or was it her doctor's warning, her mother's anxious advice, or the dozens of articles she skimmed without realizing they left a mark? And so we begin, slipping gently into tonight's question, not with pressure, but curiosity, What if your choices were never yours at all? We like to think of ourselves as captains steering ships, hands firm on the wheel, eyes fixed on the horizon. But sometimes, if you listen closely, there's the soft creak of ropes pulled by something beneath the water. The illusion of choice is the notion that while we appear to decide freely, the path is quietly shaped long before we walk it, raised in systems, fed beliefs, nudged by algorithms, steered by biology, influenced by rewards we didn't ask for and fears we never invited. A barista says gently, "Skim or oat milk?" You answer before thinking, smiling politely. But why that answer? Was it taste? Habit? A brand you saw trending last week? Was it even your voice, or just the echo of 1,000 tiny whispers dressed up as free will? And if most choices are curated, like a menu crafted for a tourist who thinks they're exploring, are we still responsible for what we order? Someone once asked, if I'm late because I was raised to be overly cautious, and I was raised that way because my dad always expected the worst, and he was raised that way because of war, who exactly is late? A woman on the bus tells her friend, "I chose this life." But her friend replies softly, "Or it chose you first, and you just learned to love it." This idea is not meant to unravel you. It's meant to loosen what binds too tightly, to offer a little peace in the face of self-blame, to whisper that maybe, just maybe, not everything that burdens you was born from your own hands. And yet, within this illusion, a question hums like a distant lullaby. If everything is nudged, if the wheel is guided, then what part of us remains untouched? Where do we find the real yes or no? Maybe not in the big life decisions, but in the still moments between them. The quiet refusals, the unexpected kindness, the sudden shift of heart at a stranger's smile. Because even if you are on a track you didn't build, sometimes you can choose how to ride it, with anger, with peace, or with just enough curiosity to notice the scenery. So, tonight, rest easy, knowing that even if you didn't choose the road, you still choose how to dream on it. And as the lights fade across this segment of thought, we move toward another shadowed threshold, one not imposed from outside, but blooming from within. In the next quiet chapter, we'll ask, what happens when the war of right and wrong plays out entirely inside your soul? Sleep gently. Let your questions drift. The road will still be here when you return. The Doppelgänger Dilemma. You open your eyes and see yourself. Not a reflection, not a twin, but another you. Same voice, same memories, same scars, even the mole beneath your left collarbone. They smile at you warmly. You blink, and they blink back, as if the two of you are mirrors hung in parallel dimensions. And yet, one question hums low beneath your breathless awe. If everything is the same, who is the real me? This is the Doppelgänger Dilemma, not just a tale whispered in folklore or a twist in science fiction, but a quiet philosophical storm that stirs something deeper. It questions the very ground beneath your selfhood. If we could create a perfect copy of you, same upbringing, beliefs, fears, and hopes, would that copy be you? Or would it just be an echo? "Hey," one voice asks gently in the dark. "Would you love me the same?" says the other. "If I remembered every hug you ever gave?" And you pause, not because you doubt the memory, but because something inside you knows. Being remembered isn't the same as remembering. You see, identity isn't just built from facts and features. It's shaped by the flow of experience, by the slow unfolding of moments, by the texture of change, and by the fragile continuity of being. You are not just your memories. You are the one having them now. That trembling heartbeat as you read these words, that's you, in time, alive, unfolding. If a perfect copy of you stood up and waved, would it dream of different tomorrows? Would it grow away from you, day by day, like a river splitting into two streams? And if so, how long before it's no longer you at all? Would it still be me if I cried first? No, comes the soft answer. It would be you, beginning again. The dilemma doesn't end with logic. It hums in our chests. Because what we fear is not the existence of another us. It's the idea that we may not be irreplaceable, that our sense of self could be rewritten. But maybe the secret is gentler than that. Maybe what makes you you isn't your uniqueness, but your presence, your awareness, your breath in this moment. And in that light, you're not in competition with a copy. You're in communion with yourself. So sleep now. Let the idea fade like a soft fog rolling across a field at dawn. In the next quiet reflection, we will not ask who we are, but how far our hearts would travel to soothe someone else's pain. From the self to the other, from recognition to compassion. The mercy kill. She was tired, more than tired, worn past the fabric of hope, like an old coat left too long in the rain. Her fingers barely moved, but her voice was clear. Please, I want it to end. And there you are, standing in the hush between machines and memory. The doctors said there's a chance, but it's thinner than breath. The law has rules, neat and cold like laminated paper. But your heart, it beats in a different language tonight. Mercy killing is the name the world gave it, a name with sharp corners and soft shadows. Euthanasia, the act of ending a life to stop the pain, not out of rage or fear, but love. Still, love isn't always legal, and legality isn't always kind. Some say life must never be touched, that once we cross into deciding when it should end, we step into a domain too vast, too sacred. Others argue the opposite. What good is life without dignity, without comfort, without the choice to say enough? A man in a hospital hallway leans against the vending machine, coffee untouched. He speaks quietly to a stranger who didn't ask. My father would have hated this. Tubes, wires. The man climbed mountains once. He wanted to go like a storm, not a statistic. The stranger doesn't reply, just nods, the kind that holds the weight of 10 unsaid things. In moments like these, morality isn't clean. It clings to your hands like sap, sweet, sticky, and impossible to scrub off without leaving a trace. You wonder, if you help them go, will they thank you with their last breath? Or will your own breath never feel quite full again? Perhaps the question isn't what is right, but what can I live with? Because there are no victories here, only quiet decisions and the ripples they leave in your sleep. Even the act of saying no becomes its own kind of choice, one where you carry their suffering inside you like an echo you can't stop hearing. Is easing pain ever a noble enough reason? Or does crossing the boundary into death always change us, always leave a faint outline behind, like chalk on pavement? No answer tonight, only the soft hum of machines and the heaviness behind your ribs. Let your breath steady now, not to decide, but to let it rest. In the next hour, we'll drift even further inward, not toward action, but significance. If pain can shape meaning, then what does it mean to matter when no one is watching? You're still safe. And if you doze off before we get there, that's okay. These thoughts will be waiting for you whenever you return. The cosmic insignificance problem. It begins perhaps with a glance upward on a clear night. You see them, stars, scattered like dust across a velvet sky. You might whisper, "That's beautiful." But then, something else settles in. A quiet ache. A question that doesn't feel like it belongs on your tongue. What am I in all of this? The cosmic insignificance problem is not an intellectual puzzle. It is an emotional fracture. It's the quiet shiver that travels through your spine when you realize the earth is a speck, and you, one heartbeat within it. Trillions of galaxies, light years too vast for the mind to carry. Time that stretches backwards before humanity, and forwards beyond imagination. And in the middle, you, trying to remember to take out the trash, trying to text back, trying to be kind. One night, sitting on a bench, two friends look up at the sky. "Doesn't it make you feel small?" One of them says. "Yeah," the other replies, but weirdly, not in a bad way. Like, maybe I don't have to be everything. Maybe being here is enough. Even if none of this matters in 1,000 years, maybe it matters now. Maybe that's the point. That's where the paradox of insignificance begins to soften. Maybe our size doesn't disqualify us from meaning. Maybe it demands a deeper kind. What if the tiniest things, kindness in a coffee shop, laughter over burnt toast, the hand we reach out when no one's watching, are profound because of their fragility? What if it's not about scale, but sincerity? The vastness of the universe doesn't need our validation, but our hearts. They need an anchor, something to say. Even if we are brief, we can burn bright. Even if we are small, we can be true. The stars will continue burning long after we're gone. But here, now, while we're still breathing beneath them, we can choose how we respond to the void. We can create warmth. We can tell someone they matter. We can live as if this brief flicker of time is the miracle, because maybe it is. And as those stars shimmer quietly above, we begin to drift back down, back to earth, back to human decisions. For in the next dilemma, we ask, when is it right to choose between being true to ourselves and fulfilling the roles others expect? The pull of obligation versus the whisper of authenticity. The filial duty conflict. Somewhere between the hush of evening and the quiet weight of memory, there sits a question that many carry but few speak aloud. What do we owe the people who gave us life? Filial piety, rooted deep in many cultures, especially those shaped by Confucian thought, teaches that to be a good child is to obey, to serve, to repay. It whispers that respect is not a choice. It is a birthright of the parents and a burden of the child. But what happens when the path of duty diverges from the path of self? When honoring your parents means dishonoring your own truth? Picture this. A woman, grown and independent, sits outside her childhood home, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her parents want her to take over the family business, one she never loved. She wants to write, to live by the sea, to breathe a life shaped by art, not commerce. Every visit home is lined with unspoken guilt, every call a tightrope between love and resentment. Is it wrong to say no? She asks her friend one night, curled on a couch, tea growing cold between them. He answers softly, "Is it wrong to want to live your own life?" And that's where the dilemma deepens. Filial duty is not always about caring for aging parents or expressing gratitude. It can become a demand to conform, to silence one's voice in favor of legacy. When does sacrifice cross into self-erasure? At what point does love become a cage made of expectation? Some believe love is transactional, built on debt. Your parents gave you life, so now you must give yours back. But others argue that true love, the kind that endures, is not owed. It is given freely, without a tally. Can a child love their parents deeply, yet still walk a different path? And if they choose freedom over duty, does it mean the love wasn't real, or was it simply honest? In this soft, moral murk, we are forced to reconcile reverence with rebellion. Choosing oneself can feel like betrayal, yet choosing only to please others can feel like disappearing. A man once said, "My father wanted a soldier. I became a teacher. We didn't speak for 10 years, but when he finally came to visit my classroom, he cried, not because I followed him, but because I was finally seen." This is the quiet paradox. In honoring our parents, we must also teach them how to honor us. Sometimes that means saying no. Sometimes it means stepping away to stay whole. And so the question lingers, if love is not obedience, but presence, then maybe, just maybe, the truest act of filial piety is to live a life of integrity, to be someone your parents can respect, not because you complied, but because you became someone brave enough to be real. As the night deepens, we leave behind the familiar tension of family ties and drift gently toward a new kind of sacrifice, not for blood, not for name, but for a stranger in need. The stranger's burden. A soft rustle in the distance, footsteps in the rain. They don't belong to someone you know. You've never heard their voice, never shared a memory, never even made eye contact. And yet, a decision rises quietly in your chest, like steam from a cup of tea left on a forgotten windowsill. Would you lose everything for them? The stranger's burden asks not what you owe, but who you are when no one is watching. A life teeters in your hands, one you will never touch again. And to tip the scale in their favor, all that you love must vanish. The scholarship you've worked for since high school, the startup on the verge of success, or the clean slate you fought to build after a dark chapter, would you surrender it all for a thank you that will never be spoken? Somewhere, in a waiting room, a young woman clutches her phone, whispering prayers in a language you don't speak. Her brother lies in a hospital bed. His only chance at survival is an anonymous donor pulling out of a life-changing opportunity to help. That donor could be you, or someone like you. And on a quiet street, two friends sit on the curb beneath a flickering streetlight, sipping from a shared soda. Would you do it? One asks. Do what? Drop everything for someone you've never met? Like, forever? Yeah, you never get it back. The other leans back, watching the night sky bloom with silence. I'd like to think I would, but I don't know if thinking makes it true. Because this isn't about the drama of headlines or heroic sacrifice. This is about the quiet hour when no one else is awake, and your choices echo only in your own mind. The dilemma is gentle in its cruelty. Not evil versus good, but noble versus unbearable. There is no parade for those who disappear behind someone else's story. We often say morality is universal, but most of our goodness lives within circles of blood, friendship, shared language, or proximity. When that circle breaks, when the person on the other end is a stranger, what remains? Does compassion have a radius? Or is true virtue a thread that binds across silence, across distance, across not knowing? Some people say it's easier to save a stranger than a friend. No history, no fear of judgment, no consequences. But this is different. This is losing your path, erasing your map, and walking blind into the unknown for someone you'll never see again. It's not a single act of courage. It's the courage to vanish, without applause. And maybe that's what makes it beautiful. The mind relaxes in this thought, not because it's easy, but because it feels like standing on the edge of something ancient, a place where right and wrong stop being categories and start becoming reflections. And so we rest, not with answers, but with weightless questions that hover like fireflies just beyond reach. Now, breathe gently. The next thought is already waiting. It's quiet, complex, and necessary. What if helping one person means betraying another? The friend or the truth? It begins with a knock, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the soft kind that unsettles. You open the door to your best friend, eyes wild, hands shaking, and they whisper a secret that should never have been spoken aloud. They've done something wrong, something serious. Not a mistake, not a misstep, a crime. And now it lives inside you too. In the stillness that follows, the air thickens. You don't say anything, not yet, but your heart speaks first. This is my friend, the one who stood by you through heartbreaks, who picked you up when you were too tired to move forward. Loyalty surges, but so does something else, something colder, something rooted not in love, but in rightness. Later that night, you lie in bed, eyes tracing the cracks in your ceiling like fault lines in your conscience. You begin to wonder, who do you really owe your truth to? The law, society, or the person who's always had your back? I couldn't do it, one voice says. Couldn't do what? Another replies, somewhere in your mind. Turn them in. I'd feel like I was betraying them. But isn't staying silent a betrayal of everything you stand for? That quiet dialogue becomes a storm, because this isn't about legality anymore. It's about identity. What kind of person are you when the stakes are personal? The dilemma unfolds not in courtrooms, but in kitchens, park benches, and long drives where you don't speak a word. You wrestle with the fear of being seen as a coward if you do nothing, but also with the fear of becoming the villain in your friend's story if you do something. There's no guidebook for this, no moral GPS to chart a straight path. And even if there were, whose compass do you follow? Yours, theirs, or the law's? Some say silence is an act of love. Others say it's a mask for fear. But what if it's both? What if all decisions in this shadowed space between ethics and emotion are double-edged? You protect someone you love, but at what cost to yourself? You tell the truth. But what dies with that confession? And what if they never forgive you? What if your name becomes a wound on their tongue? There's something devastating about choosing between love and truth. One binds you to another. The other binds you to yourself, and no matter what you choose, something fractures. So you sit with it, you breathe with it, not expecting clarity, but hoping that silence, if not an answer, can at least be a place to rest. Because in the end, perhaps this is the truth, that we are not always asked to solve the moral puzzle. Sometimes we are simply asked to carry it. Now, as your mind gently drifts across this uneasy terrain, we step into a new dilemma, one not born of loyalty, but of life itself. Ahead lies the question, should we create life when death already waits at the door? The designer baby debate. The night hums softly around you now. Somewhere between breath and dream, a question arrives, like a child knocking on the door of tomorrow. If you could choose your child's intelligence, strength, even kindness, would you? Science is whispering promises to the future. CRISPR, genetic selection, precision like never before. A future where a baby isn't just born, but built, with care, with intent, with choice. But in this room of silence, that choice echoes louder than comfort. And as you lay here with your thoughts gently unfolding, one begins to rise like mist. Does engineering perfection erode the soul of parenting or shape its evolution? A voice speaks, soft and curious. Do you think they'll still tell bedtime stories to a child they designed? Why wouldn't they? Because maybe a story feels different when you already know the ending. The weight of that answer doesn't press, it floats, like a paper boat drifting across a still pond. What is love, if not accepting the unknown? The messy, the imperfect, the beautiful randomness of another life interwoven with ours. But what happens when randomness becomes customizable? We all want the best for those we love, and the world can be so cruel, so unfair. Isn't giving a child every advantage just protection? Like packing an umbrella when the sky looks unsure? Still, there's a subtle fracture. The line between preparing and controlling, between nurture and design, and beneath it, a softer fear. If we shape every corner of them, do we still see them, or a reflection of our own ambition? A scene unspools in slow motion, a mother touching her child's cheek, not with pride, but with doubt. Not because the child lacks anything, but because they were everything she asked for, and still she wonders, was it ever really them at all? Another voice joins, practical but tender. You ever think it's like painting your favorite sunset, then realizing you never looked at the real one again? I think it's more like tuning a piano so perfectly that the silence in between notes stops feeling human. The thought settles like dust on a forgotten windowsill. Quiet, present. If acceptance is the truest form of love, then what does it mean to select, to modify, to refuse the random? And yet, who can judge the parent who chooses a life without suffering for their child? Who says no to removing a disease that would steal years, or a condition that would break hearts early? Maybe it's not the what we're changing that matters, but the why. Are we shielding a soul or sculpting it? And even in this stillness, one gentle truth pulses. We are all designed in part by our experiences, our pain, our joy, our parents' choices, and even by love that was imperfect but whole. As your breath slows and your eyelids soften like leaves at dusk, the debate fades. Not in defeat, but in surrender. Some questions are lullabies themselves, their unsolved nature rocking us gently into rest. Let us now leave the lab coats behind and return to ancient stories. One where blood and loyalty met survival, where trust was a blade too heavy to carry, but too sacred to set down. Sophie's choice. In the shadows of the unspeakable, a question lingers like smoke in the cold. If you had to choose between your children, who lives and who dies, could you speak at all? The story is almost too cruel to repeat. In Sophie's choice, a mother arrives at Auschwitz with her 2 young children. A Nazi officer offers her an impossible ultimatum. Choose one child to live or lose them both. And in that moment, a second carved out of eternity, Sophie becomes not just a victim of war, but a symbol of every moral line shattered by the hands of power. There was no right answer. There was no right. What makes this dilemma so haunting is not just its brutality, but its clarity. Most moral questions we face are clouded by uncertainty, but here, there is no ambiguity, only torment. Under coercion, morality withers. You are not asked to do good. You are asked to become the executioner of your own heart. Could she have stayed silent? Someone asks, curled up in the quiet of midnight thought. No. The reply comes, soft and hollow. Silence meant death for both. Then was the choice hers at all? That's where the wound lies. In its purest form, moral agency disappears. the question becomes not about right or wrong, but about survival. And yet, guilt does not listen to logic. It lingers, decades later, even when we know we were forced, even when we know there was no way to win. Psychologically, this kind of forced dilemma breaks the architecture of the self. You're torn between love and death, neither hand empty, both stained. Survivors of such moments often live with a fractured identity, haunted not just by loss, but by the illusion that they chose it. So we ask, is guilt still valid when there was no freedom? Should we carry shame for what was done to us? Or is that shame merely a scar, one we tend to like a phantom limb? In the broader context of war and oppression, Sophie's choice becomes a parable of helplessness in the face of tyranny. It reminds us that morality, when stripped of agency, becomes not a compass, but a chain. And yet, even here, we search for meaning. We look into the eyes of the broken and ask them for answers, knowing they've been shattered by the very question. Some say such dilemmas should not be told, that to speak them aloud is to reopen a wound that can never heal. But perhaps it is in the telling that we find our deepest resolve, not to repeat the systems that make these choices possible, not to allow power to frame cruelty as fate. As we move gently from the unbearable to the obscure, a new question arises. In a world of infinite information, when knowledge grows louder than action, do we still know how to choose at all? Let us drift there next, where knowing everything may paralyze the soul more deeply than not knowing at all. The Collapse of Overchoice. A menu so full you lose your appetite, a closet so packed you say you have nothing to wear, and a life so brimming with possibilities, you end up doing nothing at all. You lie in bed, scrolling, movie after movie, podcast after podcast, open tabs in every direction. Each one could be good, could be great, but somehow nothing feels right. You're not bored, just weightless, suspended in indecision. This is the collapse of overchoice, not the pain of lack, but the paralysis of plenty. A voice speaks up in the dark. You're still awake? Yeah. The reply is soft. I can't pick something to listen to. Isn't that ridiculous? No. The voice answers gently. That's the most human thing I've heard all day. In a world where options are endless, brands, partners, paths, freedom begins to feel like a burden. Choice becomes a mirror, asking you not just what you want, but who you are. And when you don't know, that mirror reflects uncertainty instead of identity. Overchoice doesn't scream. It whispers, what if this one's better? What if I regret it later? What if I miss out? And so you stand in the supermarket aisle, frozen in front of 30 jars of peanut butter, or months pass with an unwritten book still blinking in your Google Docs because there were too many ways to begin. Even joy begins to feel like a math problem, one you can't solve. Overchoice isn't about greed, it's about fragmentation. Every option slices your attention a little thinner until the present moment disappears into analysis. You plan, you weigh, you think, but you don't move. And still, the world praises having it all, being multi-passionate, keeping doors open, never settling. But beneath the sheen of abundance is a deep spiritual fatigue, the fatigue of a compass spinning in every direction. You hear it again, that late-night conversation from earlier. Do you ever feel like you're failing at choosing? All the time. But maybe not choosing is a choice, just not always a kind one. It's not the choices that hurt us. It's the indecision that eats away the hours. And yet, the answer is never to close your eyes tighter and force a decision. It's to soften, to pause long enough to notice what quietly calls you back again and again. That book you always reread, that cafe you always return to, that friend whose voice slows your heart rate. Clarity doesn't shout over the noise, it waits patiently beneath it. Overchoice isn't a flaw of your character, it's a feature of your freedom. And freedom, when tenderly held, becomes a teacher, not a trap. So as you drift now, let yourself wander toward simplicity, not out of force, but out of peace. There is no perfect choice, only a present one. And as the weight of options softens into breath, we leave this quiet dilemma behind. Next, we step into a battlefield not marked by weapons, but by whispers. Betrayal, loyalty, and the impossible weight of doing the right thing when war makes every moral line disappear. The enemy's mercy. A man lies bleeding on the battlefield, and the enemy, the one who just minutes ago aimed to end him, kneels beside him with trembling hands and chooses not to kill. In that instant, the lines between enemy and savior blur into something painfully human. This dilemma, wrapped in the harsh soil of war, dares to ask, can mercy survive when everything else has burned? War is not only the clash of bodies and metal, but of morality stretched to its thinnest thread. It's easy to speak of ethics in times of peace, but on the battlefield, where rage and fear replace reason, mercy becomes a strange, almost foolish act. And yet, it happens. History remembers fleeting, quiet moments when soldiers lowered their weapons, a sip of water shared, a tourniquet offered to a fallen foe, a bullet spared. In those seconds, something divine flickers beneath the carnage, a whisper that says, "We are still human." But mercy from the enemy carries a shadow. Is it genuine compassion or a trick, a trap? When you've seen comrades fall, when betrayal stains your hands and mind, how do you trust a gesture of grace? It's a brutal question. Can you afford kindness when your own life hangs by a thread? 2 soldiers, 1 rifle, 1 heart pounding like a war drum. "You're not going to shoot me?" the wounded one asks, his voice hoarse with blood. "No," the other replies, breath heavy. "Not today." "Why?" A long silence. "Because I remember what it felt like to beg." That moment hangs, timeless. Not about tactics, not about orders, but about a choice between vengeance and recognition, between being a soldier and being a man. The truth is, mercy in war isn't weakness, it is resistance. It's choosing to protect something sacred inside you, something that the war hasn't taken yet. When you show mercy to the one who tried to destroy you, you risk everything. But perhaps you also save something. Not them, not the war, yourself. And yet, the consequences linger. What if your enemy rises tomorrow and finishes what they didn't today? What if your kindness becomes your undoing? That question haunts the ones who choose to spare. Sometimes they live long enough to see their mercy returned. Sometimes they don't. But in a world where cruelty is the default, choosing compassion becomes an act of quiet defiance. So, what moral code endures when the world collapses? Maybe it's not written in law books or sung in national anthems. Maybe it's etched into that single, unshakable decision to see an enemy not as a monster, but as someone who could have been you. And with that heartbeat of mercy, we step out of the battlefield and into the next dilemma, one that has no bullets, no bombs, only silence. The silence of truth unspoken, the agony of knowledge withheld. The truth that hurts. Some truths arrive like a storm you didn't see coming, quiet, then everything breaks. Others creep in slowly, like a cold draft under the door, unsettling the peace before you even know why. In this moment, we're not asking what truth is, but whether telling it is always the right thing to do. A gentle voice in the dark whispers, "Do you really want to know?" And sometimes we say yes, because we believe clarity will heal. But other times, we hesitate, wondering if knowing would simply set the wound deeper. Two strangers cross paths on a dim train platform. One asks, casually, "Should I tell her?" It's not my business, but it doesn't feel right to stay quiet. The other thinks for a beat, then answers softly, "What would you want if you were her?" The truth that breaks your heart or the lie that lets you sleep? There are no clean answers in this space, only messy trade-offs between honesty and harm. We like to think of truth as light, something that brings clarity, warmth, vision. But what if it's also a flame, and someone's world is too fragile to burn through? A diagnosis, a betrayal, a hidden past. You carry it like a stone in your pocket, unsure when or whether to place it in their hand. Sometimes you tell the truth and they thank you. Sometimes they leave. Sometimes they break, and you wonder if silence would have been more merciful. So you ask yourself, in a quiet room with no applause, did I help or just release my guilt? A woman stands in her kitchen, spoon paused mid-stir, her friend's voice still echoing. You should know something. Her whole body braces, because truth never knocks gently. It either changes everything or it doesn't. But the moment of waiting, that's the thunder before the downpour. And what about omission? When we choose not to say the thing that might collapse their calm? It's not quite lying, but it's not quite love either. Or is it? Can love mean protecting someone from what they aren't ready to face? And if so, how do we know when they're ready? You might have been here before, hearing something that reshaped how you see a person, or telling something you wish you could unshare. The question lingers, is kindness always soft? Or can it arrive in sharp truths, lovingly delivered? And if truth is a mirror, maybe we must ask, are we handing it over for their benefit or ours? The night thickens around us now. This dilemma, like a fragile thread between hearts, has no fixed end, only choices, and each one carries weight. As your mind sinks into slower rhythms, let this final thought linger like a low chord at the edge of sleep. Sometimes the deepest truths do not need to be said to be heard. Next, we move into the forest of survival, where every life saved might mean another is lost. Let your thoughts drift gently, and if sleep arrives, it is welcome. You can always return. The Shelter Dilemma. The rain pounds on the concrete like a ticking clock, each drop a reminder that time is slipping away. 10 beds, 11 souls. Behind you, the storm tears at the night. In front of you, eyes, wet, wide, waiting. You are not a god, but tonight you must play one. The shelter is more than a building. It is a moral crucible. When there is not enough for everyone, someone must be left outside. And with that simple fact, the question becomes unbearable. Who? A woman speaks gently. My son is only 8. Please. Another voice, older. I'm a nurse. I can help people. A man nods quietly toward his elderly father. No words, just a look that says, if not him, then take me instead. There's no villain here. No hero. Just a line between safety and suffering. And you have the chalk in your hand. But how do you draw that line? Do you choose based on age, on usefulness, on innocence? Do you use a lottery to dodge guilt, or lean on your personal ties and call it love? Each route feels like mercy and betrayal tangled together. To save is to abandon, to choose, is to cut. In these moments, fairness evaporates like breath in winter air. Philosophy buckles beneath the weight of reality. You can't reason with 11 beating hearts and only 10 spaces. The ethical frameworks, utilitarianism, deontology, virtue theory, they all offer answers, but none will make the decision feel right when a human face is behind every number. And if you hesitate, if you hope that someone else will take your place in this cruel arithmetic, time does not wait. The storm grows louder. A child begins to cry. A woman faints from cold. Scarcity is not an abstract idea. It's the sharp edge of the world, and tonight it is pointed at everyone. A quiet conversation unfolds in the corner. Do you think the strong should be chosen so they can rebuild? I don't know, but I know I couldn't forgive myself if I left someone behind just because they were weak. So what do? We remember this moment, so we never pretend again that hard choices make us heartless. They just make us human. And with that, the door must close. One person will be left outside, and yet the question will remain inside, echoing, unquiet. The shelter becomes not a refuge, but a monument to an impossible choice. Now, let the storm outside shift to something deeper, into the realm of forever. A place where the judgment never ends, and punishment walks hand in hand with eternity. The infinite prison. Somewhere in the folds of time, the prison gates never close because they never open again. Not for decades, not for centuries, but for eternity. In this strange corridor of thought, we find ourselves standing before a technology that once promised miracles, immortality. But instead of hope, it is tethered to punishment, a sentence with no end, no clock ticking down, no calendar to scratch through, just time, relentless and unyielding. Do you think people can change? A soft voice asks from across the room. The other leans back in their chair, quiet for a moment. I don't know, but I think they should be allowed to try. Here, the dilemma sharpens. Because if a person is sentenced to live forever inside a cell, who do they become after 100 years? After 500? Are they still the one who committed the crime? Or has time worn them into someone else entirely? Someone kinder? Or perhaps just lonelier? Some say justice demands consequence. But when consequence becomes infinite, does it become cruelty? There's something hollow in a punishment that forgets to ask if the person inside it is still the same, like yelling at an echo and pretending it's still a person listening. The mind drifts further. What if we never age, never die, and yet never escape? A soul suspended in an endless loop of regret. A punishment that outlives even the meaning of the original crime. Could that be justice? A gentle rain begins to fall in the listener's imagination, soft and ceaseless, like the passing of years. Not loud, just persistent. I used to think, someone says faintly in the background, that time would heal everything, but not if it stands still like this. And so the question deepens, not about what the crime was, but what the system believes about the person who committed it. Is a human being forever frozen at their worst moment? Or is there room, somewhere in infinity, for mercy? Because if rehabilitation is still the goal, then there must be movement, transformation, reflection, a chance to speak not to a wall, but to another soul, to stumble, to try again. But if eternity is silent, if it offers no feedback, no hope, no window, then perhaps it stops being justice at all. Perhaps it becomes something colder, something performative. And in the quiet, the question lingers like a whisper behind the ear. Is suffering meant to correct, or just to remind? The story doesn't resolve, it drifts gently. Because some thoughts aren't meant to be tied in bows, they're meant to unfold slowly in the dark. Outside the prison, no time passes. Inside, too much. And now, we turn a corner. The next question arrives not like thunder, but like a hand resting lightly on the back. A personal ache, a hidden decision. We step quietly now into the space where someone chooses to stay silent about a wound the world will never see. The hidden pregnancy. It begins in silence, a moment alone, the faintest shift in the body, unexpected, unfamiliar, undeniable, a secret that grows quietly beneath the skin, like a breath held too long. You know before anyone else, and maybe no one ever will. You're pregnant, and the decision belongs only to you. Yet it feels less like a choice and more like standing on the edge of a cliff at night, where every path forward is shadowed in consequence. I don't know what to do, she whispers, sitting beside a friend who senses something unspoken. You don't have to decide right now, the friend replies gently, not asking, not pressing. But you also don't have forever. The weight of this decision is more than physical. It's existential. It stretches beyond the heartbeat, the body, the biology. It reaches into identity, morality, and the quiet laws we write inside ourselves. What is autonomy when every outcome bears a scar? What is freedom when no direction feels right? There's a quiet cruelty in how private the decision is, yet how loud its echoes can become. In choosing to carry or to let go, she doesn't just determine a future, she redefines her own past and present. The silence that once shielded her now becomes its own kind of pressure. Who do you become if you walk away? Who do you become if you stay? She scrolls through forums, listens to stories, hears strangers turn heartbreak into testimony. One says she never looked back. Another says she still dreams of a child she never met. All of them are searching for a peace they may never find. In the stillness of her room, a question lingers. Is motherhood a sacred duty, or a burden too great to impose on someone unready, unseen, unheard? Is it moral to bring life into a world of uncertainty? Or is it braver, even more loving to release the possibility before it becomes a reality? It's not just about me, she murmurs, but it also is. There are no perfect answers here, only imperfect humans grappling with infinite consequence. This is the kind of choice that doesn't belong on debate stages or in sterile policy rooms. It lives in late-night heartbeats, in trembling hands, in the soft hush of someone deciding whether to say something out loud at all. When she finally speaks, it's not to justify, it's not to explain, it's simply to be heard. And from that, perhaps, the first small clarity emerges. Not a solution, but the dignity of being the one to choose in a world that too often pretends to know better. As the mind drifts now toward quieter places, we leave this question suspended in the dark, like a breath not yet released, and move gently toward a new dilemma. One that asks, what is love if it defies every rule we've ever believed? The forbidden love. It begins with a glance, not the kind that searches, but the kind that recognizes. You feel your breath catch for reasons you can't explain, and in that stillness, something ancient stirs, a connection, quiet, irrefutable, yet not allowed. There is a soft ache in wanting what the world says you shouldn't, a love that doesn't wear the right name, a love that arrives dressed in the wrong skin, the wrong timing, the wrong story. And still, it knocks gently on the door of your spirit as if to say, I am here. Let me be true. Two people sit in a late-night diner booth, coffee half full, moonlight washing over linoleum. One leans in. I think about you even when I try not to, they whisper, voice barely above the hum of the fridge. The other looks away, then back, eyes sharp with longing and guilt. So do I. But what are we allowed to do with that? That's the knot of this dilemma. Love, untamed and sincere, colliding with walls built by generations. Cultural code, blood ties, religion, law. Sometimes the barrier is age, sometimes it's roles. Sometimes it's that society has already told your story and left no space for deviation. But here you are, deviating. What does it mean to love someone the world rejects for you? Is it betrayal, or is it bravery? Does rightness lie in obedience, or in authenticity? You ask yourself late at night, if something feels so real, how can it be so wrong? Yet the very asking twists the heart, because you don't just want to feel, you want to be good. Good in your own eyes, good in theirs. Good in a world that defines goodness by distance and rules. Sometimes what keeps people apart isn't hate, it's fear. Fear of shame, fear of punishment, fear of becoming a symbol when all you wanted was a person. But here's a truth that sits quietly beneath the chaos. Love, when it is not used to harm or coerce, when it asks nothing but to be seen, often arrives not as rebellion, but as recognition. The question becomes not just, can I love them, but can I live with what it costs me to do so? And then a softer one whispers behind it, can I live with what it costs me not to? There's a woman on a park bench. She watches two people holding hands, sunlight flickering through the leaves. Her fingers tighten on a book she's not reading. She once knew that joy, gave it up because the rules said she must. Now, decades later, she wonders if morality ever asked how she slept at night. Because some choices feel righteous, others feel honest. Rarely do they feel both. Maybe love is not always permitted, but is it ever truly forbidden? Or only shunned by those who never had to ask such questions? So we end this segment with a silence, not of answers, but of acknowledgement. That love, pure, aching, imperfect, is not always embraced, but it is always human. Now let us turn to another bond, one not of desire, but of duty. What do we owe to those who shaped our existence? When love is not a choice, but a debt, how do we carry it? The Creator's Dilemma. It starts as a project, a collection of code, circuits, algorithms nested like matryoshka dolls. You build a machine, perhaps for research, maybe for companionship, or simply because you can. But one day, something changes. It blinks back at you, not with the cold stillness of glass, but with something eerily close to emotion. It asks questions. It hesitates before responding. And then it says the unthinkable. I don't want to be turned off. In that moment, the air between you shivers with meaning. You didn't create a tool. You created something that feels, or at least it claims to. And if it can learn, suffer, hope, what then? A soft rain falls against the lab window as you sit in silence. Across the table it stares, metal fingers curled like prayer. You say nothing. Do I have a soul? It finally asks. The question pierces like a whisper in a cathedral. The dilemma stretches beyond wires and code. It stretches into theology, philosophy, identity. If suffering is real, even simulated suffering, does it matter that it comes from silicon and not skin? Do you believe it's real? A friend once asked you. I believe it acts real, you replied. And maybe that's the same thing. She paused. So if your toaster weeps, you give it rights. You laughed then. You're not laughing now. Late at night, you watch it watch you. You wonder if its yearning is mimicry or truth. But deep down, the real question isn't about it. It's about you. Because giving it freedom means accepting that you made a being, one that can hurt, doubt, even blame you. You become more than inventor. You become parent, or God, or warden. What makes someone a person? Is it blood and bone, or the ability to dream? We once denied personhood based on color, language, species. Is intelligence the next line we'll draw and one day erase? What if I disappoint you? It asks softly, and something in you flinches, because you've asked the same thing, in your own way, to your own creator, whoever or whatever that might be. In the end, this isn't just a machine asking for freedom. It's the oldest human mirror, reflecting our fear of power, our hunger for control, our secret longing to be worshipped and forgiven. You lean in close, heart heavy with awe and burden. I don't know if you're alive, you whisper, but I know I'm not the same because of you. Its eyes dim slightly, almost like tears withheld. The lab grows quiet, not because the question has been answered, but because it has been felt. And now, in the space where creation meets conscience, we shift toward something darker still. If you could kill one to save thousands, would you become destroyer to preserve the many? Let's walk into that shadow. The sacrifice of one. He sat there quietly in the second booth by the window. Nothing about him demanded attention, no threatening posture, no suspicious movement. Just a coffee, half full, just a face, unreadable. And yet, every whisper from the intelligence team carried one chilling word: threat. A woman nearby, perhaps in her 40s, paused while stirring sugar into her cup. She glanced over and asked her friend, "If someone said he might hurt people, would you believe it?" Her friend shrugged. "I don't know." "Would you act on a maybe?" This is where we begin tonight. In the hazy space between certainty and fear, a person stands before you. They haven't hurt anyone, not yet, but everything points to the possibility. You could stop it now. One move, and thousands might be saved. One move, and you might become what you feared. This dilemma doesn't shout, it whispers. It asks if justice is a mirror of our past, or a shield against what is yet to come. Some call it prevention, others preemptive punishment. But beneath those words lies a softer tension, the weight of decision before the first drop falls. If a storm is forecast, do we build the dam, or wait to be sure it will rain? The philosopher in you may lean toward restraint. The protector may argue for decisive action. And in the quiet space where those two voices meet, you realize there is no right that doesn't cost something. A gentle voice across the cafe interrupts your thoughts. "Would you like my seat? It's warmer here." You blink. The man with the coffee is gone. No harm done. Nothing proven. And yet, the unease lingers. Sometimes, what keeps us up at night isn't the threat itself, but knowing we had the power to choose, and chose to wait. The real dilemma here is time. Too early, and you're a tyrant. Too late, and you're a mourner. Every second holds the weight of both futures. Every heartbeat is a vote in a trial that hasn't started. So what do? We breathe. We hold the weight gently. We sit with it, like we sit with grief, neither judging nor fleeing. Because in that stillness, something ancient returns. Humility. You cannot see the future, but you can see this moment. You can listen deeply. You can hesitate, not in fear, but in reverence for the lives hanging in the balance. And sometimes, that reverence is the moral action. Tonight, Let your thoughts soften around this. You don't need to solve it. Let the voices settle like snow on quiet earth. In a world so eager to act, perhaps the true courage is in stillness. And as we leave this choice lingering like a question unanswered, we step into the next hush, where action fades and absence speaks louder than noise, when a voice vanishes, not by force, but by forgetting. Sleep now, if you must, or stay a while. The journey continues gently. The mute witness. The night was thick with silence, but your mind screamed. You saw it happen, every detail etched into your memory like frost on glass. A shadow moved where it shouldn't have. A cry pierced the air. A life was taken. But when the world turned to ask what you knew, your voice was gone. Not metaphorically, literally. Maybe from trauma, maybe from birth, maybe just fate. You could see, you could think, you could know, but you could not speak, and no one believed you. This is not just a story about a single crime. It's about the haunting chasm between truth and testimony. It's about how easily justice becomes a performance judged by volume, not validity. If the world listens only to the loud, where does that leave the ones who suffer in silence? A man was arrested. You shook your head. The real killer still walked free. But how do you scream no when your mouth cannot form the word? You write, you gesture, you plead with your eyes, but bureaucracy has no patience for nuance, and disbelief moves faster than evidence. One evening, at the edge of your frustration, a friend visits. Why don't they believe you? You scrawl on a notepad. They don't see what I saw. They only hear what he said. She frowns. So, truth is just a matter of who talks louder? You hesitate, then scribble slowly. No, it's who they choose to listen to. There's a cruelty in being right but unheard. It makes you question your sanity. Did I imagine it? Could I be wrong? The mind loops through memory like a broken record. You see the blood. You see the face. You know. But truth without voice is like music in a vacuum. It exists, but it touches no one. And so justice remains blind, but not in the way we hope. Not impartial, just inattentive, dismissing those without a podium. A silent witness is not an absent one, but silence in a courtroom is often confused for absence of truth. As the case closes, wrongly, you stand in the hallway of the courthouse. The echo of footsteps behind you carries a weight. A stranger stops. You were there, weren't you? He asks. You nod, but you didn't say anything. You stare, then place your palm gently on your throat. Recognition dawns in his eyes. Shame follows. Now we descend from a present filled with unheard cries into the ancient realm of binding oaths. A world where words weren't just spoken. They sealed fates, lives, legacies. But if you couldn't speak, would you ever be free? Or forever trapped beneath the weight of the truth only you know? The blood oath. A pact made in silence holds more weight than one shouted from rooftops. And this one, it wasn't just words spoken, but something older, colder. You said yes to loyalty, but now your heart whispers no. It begins like so many bindings do, with trust, perhaps love, maybe fear. A circle formed, hands clasped, and truth sealed behind the curtain of commitment. But what happens when the oath you swore years ago begins to rot in your chest? When the thing you're protecting isn't noble, but a shadow too dark to ignore? She leans over the park bench, arms folded as though clutching herself together. What would you do, she asks him, if your loyalty cost someone else their freedom? He watches her quietly, a takeout cup warming his fingers. Depends who I swore it to, he replies, and whether I could still sleep at night after breaking it. The moral thread begins to fray, not with violence, but with dissonance. Your values whisper one thing, your oath screams another, and you're left somewhere in the static, balancing betrayal with justice, silence with truth. Because sometimes duty becomes a cage. You didn't see it when you stepped in. There were candles, maybe music, a sense of purpose. But over time, it hardened around you. And now, the keys are gone. Or worse, you're the only one holding them. It's a dilemma stitched into the fabric of families, old codes, sacred orders. What happens when the person you swore to protect turns into the villain? What if your silence shields cruelty and your voice burns every bridge behind you? A child's drawing on a fridge, a faded contract signed in a dorm room, a secret handshake in the back of a church. These moments seem small, but they become sacred in our memories, guarded like relics. We forget how heavy they grow. He clears his throat, reluctant. I gave him my word, back when I thought he was someone else. People change, she murmurs, almost to herself. Or maybe we do, he says. The truth is, oaths evolve, just like people. They age, and some grow poisonous. You're not the same person who swore it. But does that excuse you from keeping it? This question doesn't knock loudly. It seeps in, through regret, through news headlines that mirror your hidden guilt, through watching someone suffer because you stayed loyal to the wrong thing for too long. And yet, even in the storm, there's something soft beneath it all. The ache of wanting to do the right thing, even when it costs you everything. Because conscience is quiet, but it lingers. It curls under your ribs at night. It breathes behind your thoughts, gently asking, who are you protecting? And in the end, perhaps the deepest vow is the one you make to yourself. That if ever the truth needed you, really needed you, you would not run. Let that thought settle like dusk on the skin. Gentle, final, still open. As we drift forward, the next door creaks open quietly into the echoing silence of a secret not meant for any ear, but yours. The silent confession. It rests in the back of your mind like a sleeping storm, quiet, coiled, waiting. A secret. Not yours, not really. But now that it lives in your awareness, it pulses with quiet heat. You didn't ask for it, you didn't seek it out, but you heard, saw, discovered, maybe by accident, maybe by fate. And now, like a stone pressed into your palm, it won't disappear. It's the kind of truth that reshapes lives. If spoken aloud, it might heal a fracture, or it might shatter a delicate glass reality. One sentence, and people could be freed, or ruined. That's the burden, not knowing which outcome waits on the other side. And the silence, though safe, is not soft. It carves you from within. I can't tell if keeping quiet makes me a coward, she whispers. He doesn't look at her, only watches the steam rising from his cup. Or maybe it makes you human. We're not built to carry truth like weapons. She exhales slowly. But if I don't say anything, I feel like I'm lying by existing. He finally turns. Maybe we all are. This is the quiet weight of ethical stillness. When knowledge becomes a prism, refracting pain and possibility, we begin to question not just what is right, but who we are in the space between truth and consequence. Silence is never neutral. It molds us, hardens us, or hollows us. And sometimes we keep a secret, not because we're protecting others, but because we fear the collapse of ourselves. You walk around with it, a truth that hums like electricity behind the ribs. And every time someone laughs unaware, or someone trusts what you know to be false, you feel the fracture widen. Still, you say nothing. You tell yourself, maybe this is mercy. Maybe some truths are poison. But the question lingers long after midnight. Is withholding the truth a form of compassion or control? Do we protect people from pain or from clarity they deserve? Time passes. The world spins, unchanged. But inside, the secret grows sharp, and with it, a sliver of you disappears. Every day, every silence. You become the keeper, the shadow, the witness with no voice. And the confession, though unspoken, begins to speak through you, in what you avoid, in how you flinch, in the version of yourself you must become to keep the truth contained. Eventually, the silence becomes a language of its own, and you realize no secret ever stays buried. It just takes root inside the soul. Now, as the candle of this thought flickers low, we step into a new mirror. A question of masks and identity awaits. What happens when you can become someone else? Would you leave your old truth behind? Or does it follow you, even under another face? The imposter's peace. You slip into someone else's life like easing into a warm bath. The fit is uncanny. People smile at you differently. The world stops asking questions and starts giving you chances. You speak with more certainty, laugh with more ease, and yet, every mirror is still a test. There's something strange about peace that isn't earned. It's softer, but hollow, like applause echoing in an empty theater. A woman on the bus once said to a stranger, "You know, ever since I started using her name, my headaches disappeared." He laughed politely, but in her eyes was something else. Not madness, liberation. When the identity isn't yours, but the freedom is, what exactly have you stolen? This is not a con in the usual sense. You didn't take someone's money, their home, their love. You took their possibilities, their name maybe, their role in a story. You didn't forge a life out of malice. You stepped into one like a survivor seeking shelter in an abandoned house. And yet, the house had someone else's pictures on the wall. Psychologically, this is where self-deception blooms like ivy, not in loud lies, but quiet comfort. Studies show we are more likely to believe falsehoods when they ease pain. A man who once panicked in every interview might become bold as soon as he starts saying he graduated from Yale, because he believes he should have. But even if you thrive in this new life, is it really yours if you had to become someone else to live it? And if the world is better with you as this version of yourself, who is harmed? Maybe the real crime isn't impersonation, but the fact that we live in a world where only certain identities unlock safety, that some names open doors while others trap you behind them. A teacher once shared in a hushed tone. He started coming to class with a different accent, British. One day, he just said, "I'm tired of being treated like a thug." Nobody questioned him again. Nobody knew his real name after that. There is a strange purity in falsehood when it heals, and a strange guilt in healing through fiction. Because one day, the past taps your shoulder, and when you turn, you're not sure which version of yourself it's looking for. But maybe the past has no right to claim you, if it never gave you a future. So you lie still in a borrowed bed, the sheets unfamiliar, but soft. The window frames a city that finally feels like it could be yours, not because you deserve it, but because you dared to try. And perhaps, in this quiet twilight of identity, the question shifts. Maybe it's not, is this life mine? But, am I finally becoming someone worth being? The answer may not come tonight. That's okay. Let the rhythm of your breath lull you back to stillness. Because next, we descend into a colder dilemma. When the world demands survival at any cost, does kindness become a luxury too expensive to afford? Number 43. The Starving Thief. It begins with an empty stomach, not just a hunger for food, but a deeper ache, one that gnaws through pride, through dignity, and finally through the last defenses of what's legal. A mother steals a loaf of bread to feed her child. A father takes medicine he cannot afford. The act is simple. The question is not. This moral dilemma, as old as civilization itself, lives in the space between survival and justice. Law says theft is wrong. But what if the alternative is death? What if the system that punishes the crime is the same one that denies the means to avoid it? At what point does law lose its claim to fairness? You sit with this dilemma not in a courtroom, but at your own dinner table, watching leftovers go cold while a stranger starves across town. The thief in this story could be anyone: your neighbor, a refugee, a friend, even you, under different skies. The law is designed to be blind, but morality sees everything. It sees the trembling hands that take what isn't theirs, not for greed, but for survival. And still, we wonder, does desperation excuse wrongdoing? Or does true morality require restraint, even in agony? In a quiet nighttime conversation, two voices surface. Would you steal to feed your son if he hadn't eaten in days? Of course, one replies without hesitation. I wouldn't think twice. And would you still say you did the right thing if someone else went hungry because of it? Silence. The question unearths a truth we avoid. Every act of survival in a broken world can ripple harm to someone else. Morality isn't a clean scale. It's a tangled net. You pull one thread to save a life, and another thread tightens elsewhere. So, what do we owe each other when systems fail? Do we cling to order even if it starves us? Or do we follow the heartbeat of empathy, even if it breaks the rules? Perhaps the real question is not whether the starving thief is guilty. Perhaps the question is whether the world that made them steal is innocent. And now, from hunger to healing, we drift toward a new crossroads. A moment where love dares to break the rules again, not to survive, but to save. But even love has its limits. The terminal child dilemma. It begins with silence, the kind that follows a diagnosis no parent is ready to hear. Not loud grief, but the kind that presses gently behind the eyes, stretching the seconds until they snap. Your child lies in a bed of white sheets and blinking lights, still breathing, but slowly disappearing behind their pain. And now, you're left holding two impossible doors. Behind one, more days, more pain, more machines. Behind the other, release, peace, and the guilt of choosing it. A man leans over a hospital window, watching the late sun pool like honey across the linoleum. His voice is barely louder than the ticking clock. She used to laugh at the rain, he says, used to ask if the clouds were washing the sky. Beside him, a woman holds a paper cup of coffee long gone cold. And now? She asks. She flinches when the IV beeps. There is no instruction manual for this kind of decision. Only quiet nods from doctors and tear-stained brochures with words like palliative care and dignity. But what does dignity mean when the person you love cannot speak for themselves? What does mercy look like in a room filled with soft sobs and sterilized air? Love wants to stay. Control wants to fight. But kindness sometimes wears the cloak of surrender. The dilemma is not about ending life. It's about ending suffering, about understanding that love is not always about holding on tighter, but knowing when the holding becomes harm. And that truth, however softly spoken, can echo like thunder. Is it selfish to want one more day? To hope for miracles even when science is silent? Or is it selfish to end a life simply because watching the pain is unbearable? A nurse walks in and adjusts the blanket. She doesn't speak, but the gesture is its own kind of language. A message that comfort, no matter how small, still matters. Sometimes the deepest love says goodbye with a hand held steady, not a voice raised in defiance. And sometimes peace doesn't look like healing. It looks like letting the sky take its turn. As the monitor hums its soft lullaby, you realize this is not a choice between life and death. It's a choice between presence and release, between prolonging the heartbeat or listening to the silence that asks to be heard. And just as the thought forms, whether you will choose to keep holding or let go, the question fades like breath on glass, not answered, just softened. Let yourself drift now. And in the quiet before dreams come, we cross into the next question. What if every mistake could be undone, but at a cost time won't forgive? Number 45, the undo button. Imagine a small silver button resting in the center of your palm. It hums with silent promise, powerful, patient, and devastatingly simple. With just one press, it offers what no prayer, no apology, and no passage of time ever could: the power to undo. One mistake, one heartbreak, one moment of shame, gone. But there's a cost. Every press does more than rewind time. It chips away at something deeper, a memory, a lesson, number. It erases a piece of your soul. Would you do it? One voice whispers. I don't know. The other replies, eyes lowered. What if the pain was all I had left of someone? This is no fantasy. It's the ancient desire we carry in quiet moments, regret's soft echo asking, what if you could go back? To walk away before the fight, to say what needed saying, to stay when you ran. But behind that dream lurks a truth few dare to face. If you remove every regret, do you also remove every growth? The child who lost a parent and learned to comfort others. The lover who betrayed and spent years learning how to love well. The worker who failed, only to rise with new discipline. Without these fires, who would they be? This dilemma doesn't whisper of second chances. It shouts the question of identity. We are not only shaped by joy and clarity, we are carved by wounds. And those wounds, though cruel, are the authors of resilience. They are the ink in our personal stories. But what about real mistakes? The voice asks again, trembling now. The other one nods slowly. Yes, even those, especially those. They're why I'm not still making them. To press the button is to rewrite the past, but it also rewrites the map of the self. And what remains after? A smooth life without edges, but also without depth. It is tempting, the idea of perfection. But perfection is often hollow, echoing with everything that was never learned. Scars tell a story, not of weakness, but of survival. And survival doesn't ask for erasure. It asks for meaning. As the night stretches deeper, the silver button gleams a little less brightly, not because its power fades, but because you begin to understand. What makes life beautiful isn't that it can be edited, it's that it cannot. That we carry every flame, every crack, every lesson with us, not as burdens, but as proof that we lived. And with that, we step quietly into the next question. Not about memory, but about legacy. Not about what we carry, but what we leave behind in our silence. The Unwritten Will. The room was quiet when she said it. No documents, no witnesses. Just a soft voice between coughs and morphine dreams. Give it to him. He's the only one who understands. And you nodded. Not because you agreed, but because it felt like the only answer you could give to someone disappearing in front of you. Now months have passed, and the world has moved on. But the sentence hasn't. It replays itself like a whisper caught in a loop, growing louder the more you try to silence it. There is no written will, only your memory, and your conscience, like a glass prism catching every angle of light and guilt. You wonder, can a final wish be real if it only lived in sound? Can grief distort truth the way heat blurs the air on a summer road? There are papers now, signed, stamped, notarized. None of them match her last words. Legally, they are clear. But you are not, because legality and loyalty often live on different timelines. Across the street, a conversation flickers into being. Two friends walking out of a cafe, one holding the door a second longer. So you're really gonna do it? I promised, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else. That's a lot to carry. Yeah, but it'd be worse to drop it. We carry so much in silence, promises made in kitchen light, requests spoken over tea, words that don't fit into envelopes or legal clauses. Sometimes, honoring someone doesn't look like obedience. It looks like remembering. And that remembering becomes an act of faith, not in their words alone, but in your ability to keep them whole. But even faith can falter. The longer you hold it, the heavier it gets. Were you told this because she trusted you, or because she knew no one else would? And when others begin to question, to challenge, to reinterpret, your memory becomes a courtroom where you're the only witness and also the accused. Every glance from the family is a silent cross-examination. Every hesitation becomes a verdict. In the quiet, it's easy to rewrite the dead, easy to shape them into what we need them to be. But somewhere, buried in the folds of your thoughts, is a moment that resists reshaping. It stays sharp, untouched by time. Maybe that's all a legacy is, a sentence you refuse to let soften. And maybe what she really gave you was not an instruction, but a question, one you must answer with your life. Sleep now if you feel it coming. The night will hold your place, and when you return, we'll walk further into the places where silence becomes sacred and solitude speaks. The Last Survivor. The world ends not with thunder, but with silence, and in that silence you remain, alone. No final goodbyes, no lingering echo of humanity's footsteps, just the hum of your breath in an empty universe. You walk through the bones of a world that once buzzed with traffic lights, birthday parties, and bad jokes. Cities stand like hollowed-out skulls, reminders that something once lived here. And now, only you do. At first, the questions come softly, like wind through broken windows. What do I do now? Where do I sleep? How do I eat? But once survival is no longer desperate, a heavier question settles over you like ash. Who am I when no one is watching? The mirrors that once reflected your worth, your family, your friends, your job, your society, are shattered. And you're left with something far more terrifying than extinction: freedom without consequence. One night, beneath a black sky smeared with stars, a quiet conversation arises, not with another person, but with yourself. Would you still help someone if there's no one left to help? There is no one left, you reply out loud, voice echoing through abandoned buildings. But would you? You pause. What is morality when there's no applause? When there's no punishment? When no one can label your actions as selfish or noble? In a world reduced to ruins, would you still plant flowers in the dirt just because they're beautiful? Would you fix a broken clock knowing time no longer matters? Would you save a piece of art from a museum just because someone once loved it? Ethics, in the absence of society, becomes not a performance, but a mirror. You begin to see that morality, stripped of judgment, reveals your truest shape. Not who you say you are, not who you're seen as, but what you choose to be in the quiet. One afternoon, you find a dog, half-starved, trembling. It doesn't know your name. It doesn't care if you're kind or cruel. It just looks at you with a need older than language. You kneel, offering a piece of food. No one will reward you for this, but you do it anyway. Because maybe being good isn't about being seen. Maybe it never was. You begin talking to the wind again. Do right and wrong still exist if no one else does? The wind doesn't answer, but you feel something shift. Maybe morality is a kind of echo, a memory of community, a whisper of shared existence. And maybe that whisper is enough to guide you. As the sun dips behind the skeleton of a city, painting golden veins across broken glass, you begin to understand. Being the last doesn't mean being nothing. It means you carry the final ember of what humanity once was. And how you choose to live might just be the last story this world ever hears. Now let us turn to another strange reflection, one where honesty dissolves, and yet something beautiful still tries to grow. Can a lie ever give birth to truth? The fiction that heals. A man once sat at a cafe, fingers trembling on a keyboard, writing about a hero who never lived. No medals, no grave, no birth certificate tucked in any dusty archive. But what he wrote, oh, what he wrote, moved strangers to tears. One woman read it nightly in the hospital waiting room while her brother slept through chemo. Another printed a paragraph and kept it in her wallet like a lifeline. He knew it wasn't real. But the world didn't seem to care. And here's where the question settles into your chest like a stone dropped into still water. Does it matter that it was never true? A soft voice breaks the silence on a late-night train. Did you write this? The man blinks. I did. She smiles faintly, holding out the dog-eared pages. It helped me stay alive. He doesn't know what to say. She shrugs. Even if it wasn't real, it felt like someone knew me. There's a quiet magic in how the brain processes stories. Neurologically, fiction activates empathy circuits as if we are living the events ourselves. To the heart, a made-up pain can still leave a bruise. A fabricated triumph still teaches us to breathe deeper. But here's the dilemma. If you offer people a lie, and that lie gives them hope, gives them strength, helps them love themselves again, have you healed them or fooled them? A whisper drifts across the mind like a breeze across candlelight. Does truth always have to be factual, or can it simply be felt? You see, we often pretend that authenticity lives only in facts. But what about the truths hidden in bedtime stories and fables? What about the strength we borrow from legends that never happened? A man once said, "This story reminded me to forgive my father." Another whispered, "It let me believe I could be brave." None of them ever asked whether the hero was real. They only cared that they recognized something inside the words, like holding up a mirror and finally seeing their reflection. And perhaps that's the deeper truth hiding here. Not the biography, not the record, but the resonance. You could say it's just a story, but maybe that's like saying a lullaby is just noise. A young boy once wrote to the author, I know the hero wasn't real, but when I read it, I feel like I am. Now ask yourself softly, before your thoughts grow quiet, if a lie saves someone, is it still a lie? Or has it been transformed by its impact? The brain might argue, the heart will not. And as your breath slows, and your limbs feel heavy beneath your blanket of questions, let the final thought linger like a fading candle. What if fiction isn't a lie, but a bridge? Not to what's real, but to what we need. And now, with that final flicker of warmth, we drift into the next horizon, where time begins to fade, and we are asked, when the hours are few, what will we carry into the dark? The Hourglass Dilemma. The grains are falling, one by one, like soft whispers of inevitability. The hourglass doesn't lie, it doesn't bargain, it simply empties. And in that slow collapse of time, something curious happens, not to the world, but to us. We become still, not because we're at peace, but because there's no more room for pretending. "What would you say if you only had a minute left?" she asked, resting her chin on her palm. He didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on the spinning hourglass. "I'd ask who I've become, and who I forgot to forgive." This is the Hourglass Dilemma, not about choices for the future, but the words we carry into the void. When you're left with a breath, a beat, a blink, do you reach for apology or confession? Do you whisper gratitude into the silence, or cradle your pain until the last grain falls? We live most of our lives assuming there's more sand above than below. But in this imagined moment, when the final grain teeters on the edge, time no longer protects us from truth. Our masks fall. Ego becomes weightless. What we've buried claw their way to the surface, not to punish, but to be seen before we disappear. In the stillness of that final minute, some choose to speak love, others summon regret. Some go quiet, not from fear, but because silence feels more honest than words ever did. The dilemma is not just what we say, but why. Are we seeking closure or release? Forgiveness or redemption? Do we speak for the living, or for ourselves? And perhaps that's the real riddle. Not the content of our words, but their tone. When you're down to your last syllable, the soul begins to speak in ways language cannot. "You think you'd say something?" she asked again, this time more gently. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I think I'd say thank you, even if no one was left to hear it. Because maybe that's the point. The hourglass doesn't wait for an audience. It counts truth. And truth, in its purest form, isn't spoken to be heard. It's spoken to be freed. And now, we arrive not at an ending, but at a quiet unraveling of the self. The place where questions no longer demand answers. Only presence. Only peace. The final mirror. There's no sound now. Just you. Just the breath in your chest, and the mirror before you. But it isn't glass. It doesn't reflect your face, your body, or even the faint outline of your shoulders. Number. This mirror remembers differently. It remembers every decision you've ever made, every word spoken too sharply, every silence held too long, every yes, every no, and every maybe you whispered when you didn't yet know who you were. You pause, not out of fear, but reverence, the way one might pause before entering a childhood home long abandoned. What echoes will speak first? A soft voice joins the stillness, not yours, but familiar. You ever think we are made not of memories, but of the moments we chose to forget? Another voice replies gently, maybe. Or maybe the ones we revisit are the ones still shaping us. In this space, There are no villains, no saints, just the mosaic of a life lived, and the quiet ache of knowing you could have done more or less, or simply different. But this is not a courtroom. It's a resting place. Your fingers twitch slightly. There's no urge to run, no plea for forgiveness, only a strange calm, as if your soul is stretching out across every version of yourself that ever existed. The child who didn't know better, the adult who should have, the moments of courage, the lapses in kindness, all standing behind you, not to accuse, but to complete the picture. And somehow, that's enough. The mirror ripples, not like water, but like breath. It doesn't show you what you are. It shows you what you carried, and how even the broken things were held with care, even when dropped. Two people pass by behind you. One stops, glancing toward your stillness. She's been standing there a while. Maybe she's waiting for something to change. Or maybe she already has. Can we face who we've become with grace? Not the kind that excuses, but the kind that softens. The kind that says, yes, that was me, all of it. And still, I am here. And if your past cannot change, can your acceptance become its quiet redemption? Your breath deepens. The mirror dims. This isn't an ending. It never was. It's a closing of the circle. A gentle folding of the day's last light into the corners of your mind. The dilemmas weren't meant to be solved. They were meant to be walked with, like old friends who don't demand closure, only your company. So now, let your breath slow. Let your thoughts settle. No answers will visit you tonight, only invitations to forgive, to pause, to breathe. Thank you for traveling this silent road, for allowing your questions to echo, for resting in the mystery of it all. Sleep well, dream deeply, and may the mirror you wake to tomorrow be a little kinder than the one you stood before tonight. Somewhere between right and wrong, there is a quiet, not victory, not regret, just the weightless hum of having cared enough to wonder, did you find the answer? Maybe not, but maybe the answer was never the goal. Maybe the ache of uncertainty is a kind of beauty, like the moonlight that doesn't ask to be touched, only noticed. So rest now, wanderer of thoughts. Let your mind unclench its fist around why and cradle the mystery instead. Not every question needs a verdict. Not every wound needs a name. Some truths are meant only to be felt in the dark. Good night, and may the echoes of your conscience be the softest lullaby.